If you run a business, you need more clients. That's never changed and it never will. What is changing is how the smartest operators get those clients. Right now, that means AI and automation. But let me be clear, this isn't just another collection of service level tactics, and it's not a bunch of recycled templates you've seen before. What you'll get here is the actual process I used in my own business, with every step shown, so you can finally stop guessing and start getting results. This is the clearest, most actionable, no bullshit free 3-hour masterclass on YouTube for one thing, using AI and automation to generate leads predictably, efficiently, and without ever hiring a team. So why am I putting this out there for free? Well, simple, I get asked for it every single day. My calendar is packed. There's simply no way I can work one-on-one with everyone who reaches out. And honestly, too many people are piecing together advice from 15 different videos and simply getting nowhere. So I want to make one clear end-to-end path. So if you've ever dropped a comment or DM asking for an A to C system, this video is what you've been waiting for. Inside, you'll see the actual frameworks and backend I use to scale my agency to over $100,000 a month. And the same systems dozens of founders, freelancers, and consultants have used to break through 10K, 50K, even 100K a month without hiring or burning out. So if you're a solo founder stuck sending emails all day, a freelancer who can't break past that 10K mark, or just ready to finally build a real AI-powered lead gen agency that delivers for clients, you're in the right place. Shut down your other tabs, grab a drink, open your notes, because it might be the only AI course you actually finish and the only one you'll actually use. Before you touch a single tool or build any kind of system, you need to know why this works, because almost everyone fails at this stage. Not for a lack of hustle, but because they're still following advice built for a totally different era. That's what this first module is about. I'll start by showing you how I built 50K a month pipeline as a solo operator. You'll see why cold outreach paired with smart AI is the highest ROI channel for business to business, and why so many people get it wrong. We'll get brutally honest about why most outreach systems fail. Usually it's because they're not relevant enough, they create too much friction, or they're just copy-pasting someone else's tactics without any understanding of the why. I'm going to give you the mental models and the logic so you can stop starting from scratch every quarter, stop chasing the next growth hack, and actually build a lead engine that lasts. And if you're sitting there thinking you don't have a network or you're not sure how to start, good. I'll break down exactly how I got my first client, the 3 real paths to landing new business, and how I turned these skills you're about to learn into actual revenue. By the end of this module, you'll walk away knowing how to think about AI first lead generation, why it works, and how to filter out 95% of the noise you see online. This is the stuff I wish I'd had when I started, so take it seriously.
One of the biggest challenges B2B businesses face is a consistent flow of new leads and client acquisition. Without a steady flow of qualified leads, it's nearly impossible to sustain growth for any business. Many businesses rely on outdated methods like generic cold emails or poorly targeted ads, which waste time, resources, without actually delivering any results. On top of all that, the competition is fiercer than ever, making it even harder to stand out and connect with the right prospects. To illustrate what not to do and to show you how I've done it, let me quickly show you guys 2 email templates. So on the left, we have a very generic email, and on the right, we have a highly personalized one. There's no personalization. On the right side, everything that's within brackets is a variable, so you could view that as personalization in some way. Hi, I help companies improve their sales with automation. We have a system that gets leads for businesses like yours. It's easy to use and doesn't require much effort on your part. Lots of companies have used it and seen great results. You could too. Would you like to hop on a call to learn more? Let me know or book a time here. I think it goes without saying that this email on the left wouldn't get very many replies. The reason why is because everyone could see this is a bulk email, bulk sent email. The time wasn't even taken to insert the first name or the company name anywhere. So on the right, one of the emails I actually used myself quite a long time ago, maybe one of the earlier ones. In the subject line already, I used their company name. I also suggest using someone's first name, being like first name, comma, quick question, things like that. Hey, first name, came across company name on LinkedIn. I specialize in helping companies like company name connect with your ideal customer profile and scale your sales pipeline by leveraging AI and automation. Or done for your lead system ensures you get buy-ready leads without burdening your team with additional setup or time commitments. Here's the kicker. So here I introduce a guarantee. I always suggest you guys to use a guarantee. And then here's the social proof. I also use type of company as a variable. So in this case, let's say they are a grocery store. Then this would read, in the past year, we've worked with 200 plus grocery stores. It would be a lie. And please don't lie in your cold outreach because the customer can easily get through that in a sales call. But just as an example, it would demand authority because people think, oh, he has already worked with 200 different grocery stores. He must know what he's doing. Let me get him on board. Well, I think it goes without saying that you guys could easily notice and spot the difference. As I said, the first email is very generic and could be sent to anyone. It's not likely to grab attention or spark any interest. The second email, on the other hand, feels personal and relevant. It is clear to the reader that the sender put effort in understanding the recipient, making them more likely to respond. But here's the challenge. Creating personalized emails like the second one takes time. Up to 30 minutes for just one email to be done manually. Luckily for both you and I, that's where AI and automation come in. With the right tools, you can scale this kind of personalization to hundreds or even thousands of emails in mere minutes, saving you a lot of time while also dramatically increasing your chances of any success. Now, let me show you the N8N workflow I personally use for lead enrichment, which is just a fancy way of me saying how I gather detailed information about my leads, which I can then use to either fill in templates or write personalization. Normally, this process would take hours if done manually, but with this workflow, it is completely automated. Not only does it save a ton of time, but the AI follows precise prompts. It eliminates human error, ensuring data is accurate and ready to use. So what you see on screen are 3 individual flows. In previous examples or in previous videos, I've put all of them together, but in this case, I'll just want to go over them one by one to show you what you can get from each source of information and how you can use that information to then fill in the templates. We'll start off with the trickiest one, which is to scrape the personal LinkedIn profile. Then we'll go on and I'll quickly go over both of these, the company LinkedIn profile and the company website scraper, because they're essentially the same. You just use a different URL within these HTTP requests, but the code for filtering that HTML then is exactly the same. You have to imagine that each of these workflows is being triggered by a webhook. For those who aren't aware, a webhook is simply a signal it receives from somewhere. Well, in this case, the somewhere is the CRM. So a change in my CRM, which for a CRM, I always use Airtable, but a change within my Airtable would trigger this flow. For those who aren't aware or aren't familiar with Airtable, I've been talking a lot about it in other videos, but I understand that there might be some confusion. It's very similar to Google Sheets. I'll quickly show you so we're on the same page. So this is one of my Airtables. This is a giant lead list. You can see first name, full name, their email address, and so on and so on. And here is the important information like their personal LinkedIn profile, URL, their company LinkedIn and their company website. So how I got this lead list is just from Apollo. There's a video on my channel if you're interested. It's the best database for getting lead lists. So now you know what happens in here. So once a change is made inside of the Airtable, let's say I change the status of one of my leads to enrich the lead, which then triggers an automation, which then sends a webhook to start this flow. So for the HTTP request node to make a request to the right address, in this case, I need the information from the lead. That's what I do in this node. It's very straightforward setup. You just log in with your credentials. You set the operation to get. Well, what you can see here is just the name and the table of my Airtable document. And this is a specific individual record ID. You can see over here it's set to expression, meaning this can also be a variable. In most cases, let's say you're doing this automatically, every lead has their individual record ID. So you want this to be an expression, this one to be exact. If you would replace this one by this one, this would just get the individual's record ID each and every time, meaning you don't have to put them in manually. And then on the right side, we can see the output from triggering this node, which is just all the information about the lead. Well, it's the same information that was in the Airtable I showed a minute ago, like their first name, company name, LinkedIn URL, whatever. So the distinction between this flow and why it's a lot more elaborate than the other two is because in this case, we're using an API to call upon a scraper. Why do we need to do that? Well, that's because personal LinkedIn profiles are a lot more protected. I think it's because they're data sensitive, so their privacy is more protected. And to kind of circumvent that, or what that means, before I go about circumvention, what that means is that we can't just fetch the HTML because LinkedIn has some built-in code which prevents us from getting all the HTML from the website. So we have to use a scraper. I use a scraper in Apify, literally called Personal LinkedIn Scraper, made by Curious Coder. It's a very straightforward process. So for the scraper to work, we need two things. We need two HTTP nodes to be exact. I'll go over the merge node and everything on the right in a second, but first let me go over the HTTP node so you know how to set up an API request and to also how to retrieve the data once the scraper is done. So first let me dive into this one. So for this one, it's important that for this HTTP node, it's important that you set the method to post. So what happens? There is a scraper. The scraper is in Apify, which is just a giant marketplace for scrapers. And we want to activate that scraper with the information that we have. In this case, with a specific personal profile LinkedIn URL. So to do that, we post like an action. So we send an action to a URL, this URL. This line over this part of the URL over here, this is like the ID of the scraper. So this is different for each and every scraper, but the rest you can just copy and paste. Here you fill in the authorization method because you need to have an API key to access the scraper. If you make an Apify account, you get your own API key, so not to worry. And then on the page of the Apify actor, there is just a bunch of things you can fill in. All the instructions over there are very clear. I went over it in previous videos, so I won't go over it again. I think it's a bit redundant because the information is very clear and it's just a copy and paste process. The only thing that's of note is that what you see over here in green, I pulled this from the left side. So I pulled the LinkedIn URL from here. I can show you what this is on the right side. So whatever here is in green is once again what's called an expression. As said before, each lead you pull from the Airtable has individual information. So you want this to be different each and every time. Otherwise it wouldn't be automated. You would only just scrape the same person each and every time you trigger the flow. So I just pulled this from the left, from the input side. You can see that this directly, this piece of code, actually because it's JSON code, translate into this. So we pull that information, what you can then, the post to the scraper was successful, as you can see on the right side. Interesting to note is that it says finished at is null, meaning it isn't finished yet. That's why these merge node, these few nodes over here were added to this flow. I'll go over them in a second, but let me finish it up. So once we've sent a post request to the scraper with this node, we've triggered it. So we've made it run. So now it's scraping whatever we're asking from it, in this case a personal LinkedIn profile from someone, but we still need to retrieve that data. And to do that, we kind of set up the exact same node, just a bit easier, and we set it to get because we want to get the information. So as I just said, the method is set to get instead of to post. And there is also a different URL. What you can see in green, once again, is an expression. It's from the left side, and it is just the default dataset ID, which is the individual ID of the dataset meaning all of the scraped information we wanted it to retrieve. So now you know how to trigger a scraper in Apify and how to essentially use any API out there. Let me go over why there is a merge node and why there is an if node and a wait node. That is because if you trigger a scraper, it takes a while for it to start running. Depending on whatever you ask from it, it might take a while to scrape all the information. So, and there's no real way of you knowing when it's done. So once let's say this merge node would not be there. Once this node is completed, which takes a split second, it would immediately tell the next HTTP GET node to get the dataset ID or to get the information from the dataset, but it isn't ready yet. Most likely the scraper hasn't even started running. So there is no information to be passed on to the large language model. So we needed a workaround. But some smart people in the comments on my previous video pointed out that there might be a different way to kind of re-trigger every 10 seconds or whatever to see if the scraper is done. And that's what these nodes are for. So if there's no output, this code says there's no output and does output the not ready. Then that is forwarded to an if node, which just simply checks if the information is ready or not. Well, if there's no information, the previous node, as I just showed, the code node has output not ready, meaning it is sent down the false branch. Well, what's on the false branch is a wait node, which waits 10 seconds before forwarding all the information again. And that's why this merge node is needed, because every time a wait node is triggered and it forwards or it outputs anything, it doesn't keep the information from the beginning of the flow. So we need to store the information from this because we want to keep the default dataset ID in this merge node. So whenever it's triggered again, it'll actually send the dataset ID, it'll actually attach this dataset ID. So we can kind of retrieve the data once again. So I really hope that made it clear for everyone. And this is also a very nifty trick to check if an API is done, or if a scraper is done, or whatever API call you've made, before I could continue on. But if you would just copy this part of the workflow and paste it after any HTTP node which triggers an API, this could also be automated. So there's no need anymore for you to do any manual checks. Well, we've received the data. On the right side, you can see the output. So this is the output from the data set. Let me put it to schema so it's easy for you to see. Well, Nick Mitchell, we know that, we can verify that because that's his name in the lead list. We can see his description on his LinkedIn profile. We can see when he started his job. Got a lot of information. Depending on someone's personal LinkedIn profile, not everyone is as active and has posted the same thing as everyone else, but there are some general trends. 9 out of 10 times it states where they work. So the problem with the output we've received from the data set, so from the scraper, is that all of this is split. So as you can see in the JSON, whatever, I don't really know. Yeah, as you can see, it's all split. It's not one large piece of text. So if you would input this into an LLM, let me show you. So you would ask the LLM something. Let's say you ask it to summarize. You would have to drag everything from the left individually, which is a lot of hassle, certainly because not all information is available always. So it would also give you some error codes, and it makes it very difficult for the LLM to read. So that's why I have using this code node. What this code node does is take everything from the left side and put it into one large piece of text. For us, it's maybe a bit difficult to read, but for the LLM, because it isn't that much information, it's quite easy. Let me show you. Here you see his first name, last name, occupation. So first name, last name, occupation. It's even in the same order. Simple piece of code. ChatGPT generated it for me, to be honest. And then lastly, we go into a large language model node. For summaries and stuff like that, I usually use ChatGPT. The model I use is Mini. This is just a showcase example. But honestly, for things like this, like summarizing someone's personal LinkedIn profile or even their company website, I use Mini because it's more than capable of performing a task like this. This is the prompt. I've received a lot of questions from people if I could paste the prompt somewhere. I've actually decided to start a school community. It'll be done in a month or so, and I'll just copy and paste all of these flows, including the prompts there. So please have a bit of patience. It'll be there. But I suggest using this as a foundation, not straight up copying it. So the prompt is very straightforward. I'll go over it quickly. I'm just telling it you'll receive data scraped from a LinkedIn profile. Use this data to answer the following questions concisely and clearly. What is the person's current role? Well, you can see their current role on the right side. They're a co-founder. How long have they been at their company? This is also duration at the company. Have they had any other roles at the company? If yes, what were they? Well, they're a founder, so it's very unlikely they've had any other roles because they started the company and have been there since the beginning. But let's say you're targeting someone or you're sending cold emails to someone who is currently head of HR, but started all the way at the bottom of the ladder. It might be interesting to say something about that, about their career development. Same goes where they go to school. I think it's a bit too personal, but maybe if both of you went to the same school, it might be a good way of creating a bond. And then lastly, write a brief summary. This is just based upon the about section of someone. This is a brief summary, but it does give you or someone from your sales team quite a good overview of who you're talking to. And this is a good starting point also for writing a personalization. You can also just input this as like data into another LLM to write the personalization for you. And then lastly, I've attached it here so you guys can just follow along, is another Airtable node which would have updated the record. So here all the way at the beginning, you would get a lead list from Apollo or Sales Navigator, whatever. You would just upload all of those leads into your CRM, but they wouldn't be enriched. Then inside of your CRM, you would press a button or change the status, anything to trigger, to send a webhook. And to activate this flow, then it would go through the flow, activate the scraper, check if the scraper is done, get the information once it's done, send it up here, summarize or answer questions, whatever, and then upload all of the answers to the CRM so you can just find it later on, which brings us on to the next flow, which is a lot easier, both for me to explain and for everyone else to understand. So let me just trigger this flow. So the flow would have started the same way by a webhook. Then you once again retrieve all the information. It's the same information because it's the same record ID from the person. Then we want to scrape the company LinkedIn. The company LinkedIn, for some reason, is always public. It's always open, so there's never any difficulty retrieving the HTML. So I just put the URL in here, say get, and on the output side, you can see it's all the HTML from the page. A lot of this, like all of the code is unnecessary for us. And we, of course, want to reduce cost. So we want to reduce input tokens. That's why this code node is here. Same goes for this, but I'll go over this in a second. This code node, all it does is remove all of the HTML. So it replaces everything with null. So you can see how this was all cluttered and difficult to read. And then on the right side is the output, which is just plain text. Easy for us to read, easy for the LLM to read, and also a lot less input tokens, which makes it cheaper, or even cheaper. And then for the LLM, I'll quickly go over the script. As you can already see the output. So I've done the same thing. I've just said you will receive data scraped from a company's LinkedIn profile. And I've asked it to answer some questions like what type of company is it? What products do they sell? And in this case, like on a company's LinkedIn profile, there's also always posts, and it's very easy to retrieve those posts. So I've asked it to retrieve the 3 most recent posts. Think back to the email templates I showed you in the beginning, and then especially to the one on the right, like the highly personalized one. There was within brackets personalization. I read through this quickly. Oh, well, here, there's the new newsletter is live. So a personalized line you could let AI write would be based upon this post, which would say, hey, interesting read in your newsletter, and blah, blah, blah. I mean, it wouldn't be true. You didn't read it. But it's very easy for you to kind of go back if there's ever a sales call to make sure he doesn't figure it out. And the same thing goes for identify their company type. So I used type of company as a variable within the template. So you could just let the AI fill it in based on the information it retrieved from their company LinkedIn. Last but definitely not least is I'll trigger this flow and show you that it's exactly the same as the one for the company LinkedIn profile. So once again, we pull the information from the CRM. Why do we need this? Well, we need this because we need their company website, we need their LinkedIn URL, and we need their company LinkedIn URL. Then we use the company website here to get all the HTML from the website. Once again, as you can see, just as it did for the LinkedIn page, it's all cluttered. So this is exactly the same code. So both of these flows are identical. The only thing that's different is here we're using the URL to the LinkedIn company page, and here we're just using the URL to the homepage of the company. So once again, this code node has filtered out all of the unnecessary code and retrieved only plain text. And then same as for each and every one of these, I've just asked it some questions. You can read through it yourself. On pages, there are also like testimonials a lot of the times and success stories. It might be interesting to mention something about previous successes they've had. It's always an ego boost if someone mentions how good you've been doing with someone else. So these are testimonials about Left Up, which is the name of the company, I guess, and how good it has been to work with them. So yeah, I mean, you could just say, hey, congrats on your success with Hub and things like that. Now that you've seen how this workflow operates, let's talk about the real benefits. Using AI and automation to enrich leads takes seconds instead of minutes, instead of maybe an hour, making it a game changer for efficiency. This workflow isn't just a standalone solution, it is a part of a larger system which you can implement to either significantly reduce the workload on your sales team, or if you're just starting out, to land you your first client. With all the data you've gathered, AI can seamlessly personalize email templates, just like the example I showed earlier, helping you stand out and connect with potential clients effortlessly. I want to give you a takeaway to keep in mind is don't rely on AI to write your entire emails from scratch. Instead, treat AI like an assistant. AI is incredibly effective for generating ideas, personalizing details, or refining specific sections, but it still needs your guidance to maintain a consistent tone and structure. When crafting your emails, focus on building a reusable framework that you can refine and personalize over time. This approach would actually allow you to run proper split tests to figure out what resonates most with your audience. For example, it would allow you to experiment with subject lines, call to action, phrasing, or the level of personalization in your opening lines. What would be my tip is to use AI to handle repetitive tasks like gathering data, generalizing personalization, snippets, or analyzing split test results.
I'm going to walk you through step by step how you can get your first client for your automation business, because I assume most of you guys watching have an end goal of turning the skills you develop by working on N8N into stone cold cash and actually make a living for yourself doing the things you like doing. I was exactly where you were at a couple of months ago, like 5 or 6 months ago, when I started working on developing my N8N or my automation skills in general. I didn't have any clients. I didn't have any purpose of doing it. I just watched a bunch of YouTube videos and thought, hey, I can replicate that. And once I started getting the hang of it, I thought, well, this can also be useful for others, but where do I start? And this video, I'm trying to show you where you can start and what I learned over the couple of months that I've been trying to get clients for myself. And even though there are really no shortcuts to getting your first clients, and it is going to take quite a lot of work, I can assure you, there are some tips and tricks I can give you. And I will also show you some screenshots of examples of automated workflows that I built myself that automate a real big part of the process of getting new clients. So this video is going to be about how to get your first 10K a month. There's such a big hype around AI at the moment, and all businesses and everyone in business is shifting their focus towards either AI or towards automating processes, which usually, as you guys know, go hand in hand. This creates kind of the perfect scenario for people who already have the skills to reach out to businesses and to just provide their services to implement either the automations or improve the automations with the new AI or with new integrations. So time is of the essence, but of course you need to know where to start and how to approach the outreach. So I never like to overcomplicate things. That's why if you get down to the nitty-gritty, there are only 3 actual ways of acquiring your first clients. The first is using your own personal network or a network of your parents or of some close friends or relatives you have. I wrote it down as you always know a guy who knows a guy. What I mean by that is that there's always someone you know who knows someone who has a problem which you, with your newfound knowledge about automations or AI, can solve. I mean, it's worth it to just let people know what you've been doing, how you've been developing your automation skills, maybe show them what's possible by a YouTube video to get them intrigued. And you never know, they might be like, oh, wow, this is really cool. This could be very useful for my business. And there you have it. You have your first client. I mean, if it's an acquaintance, you might charge just a small fee or do it for free, because maybe if it's your first, just to get the experience. And then secondly, there's inbound. I wrote it down as LinkedIn, YouTube, TikTok, but you can think of every social media there is. It's just a way of getting the word out there and getting people to approach you to solve their problems. So one of the ways I use is what you can see right now is YouTube. Even though I'm a really small channel and I just started a couple of weeks ago, I started documenting the progress I made and the things that I thought were really cool I wanted to share with other people. And through that way, through YouTube, even though I've gotten quite little views, there have still been some people who booked consultations or booked meetings and actually came to me and would be like, hey, I have this issue, can you solve it for me? And I would of course say, yeah, sure, I can solve it for you, but I charge an hourly fee. And if they agreed, I could work on a project. So I would strongly suggest, if you think you've gotten something valuable to share, if your N8N skills are anyway halfway decent, try making YouTube videos, try making TikTok videos, try even sharing your progress on LinkedIn. It only takes one person to come across your content to actually get your first client. So the channel I mainly use for acquiring new clients is outbound lead generation. And then I mainly use emailing, as you can see, but there's also cold calling or DMing people on, once again, Instagram, LinkedIn, whatever. I use emailing. Emailing has been around for a long time, but I think with the somewhat recent developments in the AI space, it's become a lot more feasible of automating the entire sales process. So I've been building out sales systems for the past couple of months now, and I think I've gotten them down to somewhat of a decent standard. So if you aren't familiar with sales, there are multiple steps to the process. I mean, first of all, you have to build a lead list. You can either scrape them from LinkedIn Navigator, Apollo. If you're looking for real estate agents, you can scrape them from Zillow. There are tons of other ways where you can connect to B2B businesses and find their email or their phone number. In this case, we're after their emails. Then you need to, the next step is enriching that data, and then on and on and on until you have a meeting and eventually until they sign a proposal. And I've been trying to automate every step of this process, and I think I've gotten quite far. So let me share some examples with you. So what you can see on screen right now is a screenshot from a N8N workflow. This one is what I was talking about first, because first we need an email to send to. So what I do is I use an API request from a Apify scraper to scrape leads on Apollo. Apollo is just one giant database of LinkedIn profiles, usually with a verified email or verified phone number. So I get those. I use my own filters. Then I tell the API to scrape the pages, and I get all the data. I then filter whatever I need, because whenever you scrape a lead, you get a lot more stuff than you actually need to enrich it later on. I don't know if many of you know, but there has been an addition, I think it's been over a month now, where N8N added a new node which lets you remove duplicates even from previous runs. Just whatever passed through, it's marked as already seen. So in this case, I filter it by LinkedIn URL. So if the same LinkedIn URL comes by, it filters it out. So my CRM won't be filled with duplicates. And then lastly, as you can see, it's put into an Airtable. I've shown it in previous videos before. I think Airtable is amazing, and you can actually use it as a complete standalone CRM. That's what I use it for. So once we have the name, the email, and just basic information about the lead, we can go on to the next process, to the next step, which is enriching your lead, getting more than just their info. So scraping their LinkedIn, scraping their website, building a profile of the one you're trying to contact and trying to do business with. I won't dive too deep into it right now, but in essence, it's just once a lead is added to the CRM, I can change its status, which sends a webhook to this workflow, and this workflow is always active. Then it just scrapes the person's company LinkedIn, it scrapes their company website, it uses all that information to answer basic questions about what their main product and service is, what their kind of industry they're in, what their mission or value is as a business. It writes down any success stories or notable achievements that they've made, because they usually post about it either on LinkedIn or they post it on their website. And then it creates a personalization, which is usually the opening line to an email. Just something which makes it seem to the people reading the email that you've actually done your research. And it not only increases your open rate because people can see it as like a preview next to the subject of the email, but it also massively increases your reply rate because people don't assume you're just sending out bulk emails, but you're actually pursuing them because you think there's a business fit between you and them. Then on to the next part. So once you start either filling your CRM with hundreds of maybe thousands of leads, and you start automating the process of enriching those leads and sending them out emails, there's always one or two that are going to respond. And replying back to a lead who responds is critical. I think if it takes longer than 15 minutes, the chance of closing the lead goes down by a few percent already. That's why I built out this email classifier, and also it's also an email responder. An email classifier is one of the first videos I made, and it's actually quite funny because it was really simple to make at the time, and I didn't really think I was going to use it because it was never needed for personal use. So once again, this workflow is triggered by a webhook. The webhook then retrieves the email reply, not the email that we've sent, so one of the cold emails that we've sent, and also the reply we've gotten to that email. It then retrieves the information of the lead, so their information, their personal information, their name, blah, 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 and all the things that we've enriched. That is parsed to a code node, and then it's just a simple email classifier. I've given it pretty basic instructions, usually based on keywords or things like, so let's say your call to action in your outbound email is, are you free to schedule a meeting next week? And a reply to that email might be, yes, I am free next week. Can you send me your calendar? So in that case, it would be classified ready to schedule. That's the classifier name that I've given it. And it would go to the upper channel, which would then change the status of the lead in my CRM. So in Airtable, it would also change the status in Instantly. This is a step not necessarily for everyone, but I just like to keep everything in sync. And it would then craft a reply. So this is almost like a template. So the only variables it'll have would be input from the person's reply, so their first name or maybe some specifics that they've sent in the email. It would wait because if this workflow is triggered seconds after I've received the email, but it's not really realistic to send an email back within seconds. That's why this is a random interval, somewhere between 5 to 10 minutes, and then it sends an email using this HTTP request node. You have to imagine that this can flow indefinitely. So as you can see, there are a lot of routes people can go down. They can ask for request more information. They can have objections, all sorts of stuff. Maybe it would be helpful if I sketched a scenario. So let's say you send out a cold email, it's your first cold email, and it's telling them that you can build them automations that increase the speed of their processes and increase their ROI within 30 days. They would request more info. So it would go down the more info route. The reply would be received by this workflow and it would go down the more info route. Then you send them a case study, for example, that you've made or that you let AI, ChatGPT write. And they read the case study and reply back to you with, wow, this is really amazing. I think this would be a fit for my company. So in that case, the workflow would trigger again. And instead of going down the more info route, it would go down the ready to schedule route. You would send them a calendar link to set up the meeting, and voila, it's a one-on-one call between you and a potential client paying you money. So once this reply and answer loop is closed and the meeting is booked, we go on to the next, which is quite a simple flow. As you can see, this is triggered when a meeting is booked. For that, I use Cal.com, but you can also use Calendly or whatever. I would choose something with a native integration, but you can of course also choose something which can send a webhook, and it retrieves the Airtable data because we need the first name and we need their email address, etc., etc. Then it goes down one of either of these two routes based on, do we have the information, yes or no, and it sends out an email with a thank you for scheduling the meeting. I'm looking forward to talking to you one-on-one. Here is the meeting link in case it gets lost in your spam. Once the meeting is booked, it's really up to you. You've let AI and automation to do most of the heavy lifting, but at some point there's going to be some actual contact between you and potential clients. I would suggest making a presentation for yourself, like not a stiff old PowerPoint one, but just something with maybe a few screenshots of N8N workflows or projects you've either worked on for other people or things you have built out yourself, so you can just show them what's possible. And you also have some guidelines for yourself, because it can be quite intimidating. I can already promise you that not all of your sales calls will be a success. There will be some times where you just can't close, you can't agree on the price, or you can't agree on the scope. But let's look on the bright side and let's think of a time where you did close the deal. Then you would use this last system. It's just, once again, it's called triggered by a webhook. So you would change the status in your Airtable CRM. The webhook would trigger the flow. It would retrieve the information from the Airtable, and it would send an email thanking them for the opportunity to talk to them and saying that the proposal will be sent within a few hours. One thing that I've been thinking about that I will add, and you can also add to this workflow, is a transcription and a summary of the meeting that you've just had. Like I know Zoom does, and probably also a lot of video call solutions have the opportunity to download the transcription of the meeting, and then you can just let AI summarize it and give bullet points in the email back to the client. They will really appreciate it, and it's also very useful for yourself once writing the proposal, or if you have to get back to them at a later point in time to get the essence of what you talked about.
All right, this is where we go from ideas to a system that actually does the heavy lifting for you. You'll see how I pull in the right leads automatically from LinkedIn and Apollo, then turn raw data into context-rich profiles that make every email feel like it was handcrafted. I'll show you how to filter, qualify, and clean your list so you never waste time talking to the wrong people, and how I use automation to reply to leads while I'm sleeping so no opportunity slips through the cracks. Everything in this module is what I actually used in my own agency. You'll see the full system working end to end with all the logic behind every move. And if you want to skip ahead, download the latest blueprints or get direct support, you'll find all of that inside my school community. That's where I keep these systems updated, because what works today keeps evolving, and I share those updates with the people actually building alongside me. If you're ready to stop playing small and let these systems do the work, you're in the right place. Let's get into it.
With a simple workflow built in N8N, we're going to 1. Find high quality leads using LinkedIn Sales Navigator. We're going to extract their full contact details with an API scraper, and we're going to automate the entire process so you can get leads on autopilot. Once this is set up, all you have to do is press a button and watch verified leads come into your CRM automatically. Now, today's focus is purely on extraction, so getting the leads, but once you have them, you can enrich their profiles with even more data and use AI-powered personalization to craft outreach emails that actually get responses. I'll briefly show you how that works too, so you don't just have leads, you have warm prospects ready for contact. I'll touch upon the enrichment part and the AI personalization part later on in this video, so let me quickly zoom in so you guys can get a glimpse of what I'm talking about. Okay, so from left to right, as always, in order to extract any information from LinkedIn Sales Navigator, we'll be needing to use a scraper. We're using an API scraper to be more precise. I've pasted the URL to the API scraper here. I'll quickly go over it so you know exactly what you need to set this up and connect this to your own workflow. So what you see on screen is the API scraper. It's called LinkedIn Sales Navigator Scraper, so it's very straightforward. To connect a scraper to your N8N workflow, you're going to be needing 3 things. You're going to be needing your API keys, which are personal and can be found in your profile settings. You're going to be needing the URL endpoint, which can be found in the API documentation of Apify, but I'll quickly show you because it's already set up inside of the HTTP node. And you'll be needing the JSON body, which includes the parameters which are needed for the scraper to start running. As I said, the API keys are inside of your personal profile, inside of the settings, and the endpoint URL is not on this page, but it's just a generic one. All you need is the
scraper ID, which is inside of the URL. I know it's just cropped out of your screen, but I'll go over it inside of the node in a second. First, let me show you how to set up this scraper and get the JSON code, which you need to copy and paste later on. So to set this up, first you'll be needing your LinkedIn cookie. Your LinkedIn cookie is essentially just stored data of your LinkedIn profile, which gives the API the right credentials to start using your account to scrape the information. All you need to do is download a Chrome extension, the cookie editor. If you press on the question mark, you can just press on the link and download it yourself. Then you would need to go on to your Sales Navigator account, go to the Chrome extension, cookie editor, just export as JSON, go back to the API and paste it in the cookie section. It would look something like this. This is going to be different for each and every one of us because we have different login credentials, but it is very straightforward to set up. As I said, all you need is a Chrome extension and just export it manually, paste it in here, and you're done forever. Then if we scroll down a bit, you can see that it requires us to input a search URL. You can easily get the URL by going to LinkedIn Sales Navigator. Before you straight up copy and paste your URL, you might want to narrow down your search. You can do that by using the filters inside of LinkedIn Sales Navigator. They make it very easy for you to kind of pinpoint your ideal customer and create a very targeted lead list. So let me walk you through some of the options. If you have a specific company in mind you want to target, you can do this under the company section. I wouldn't really recommend filtering it down company by company, but one of the filters I would recommend using is the company headcount one. This allows you to kind of filter for companies with a specific headcount. So let's say you're just like me, you're offering lead generation services, so you're basically replacing an SDR. In that case, you don't want to target companies which already have an extensive sales department because there's a very slim chance they're going to be needing your services. So in my instance, I would, for example, only target businesses which have a headcount between 1 and 10 or maybe 11 and 15 if I'm feeling frisky. Moving on, you can also select or filter by company headquarters location. Might be interesting. Let's say you're only offering service in California, for example, and this is one you want to fill out. Now we're getting onto the more personal section, their role, like their function, their seniority level, things like that. Since we're doing cold outreach, you always want to target decision makers like founders, CEOs, owners, you name it. So that you can do in this section. You can actually filter straight up by current job title. Let's filter for founders only, include founders, and you can see immediately that it fills up with only founders. In the top right, you can see we have 3 million results for founders, which is a little too broad. So you can narrow it down further, for example, by going into the industry they work in, which let's say is design services. Let's include those. Now we still have over 100,000 results, so narrow it down even further. Let's say we only want founders of design service companies in Miami. There we go. And it leaves us with 363 founders of design services companies in Miami. This, of course, is just an example of how narrow you can actually filter. You can leave it a lot more broad. You can filter for kind of anything you can imagine. As long as the point came across that LinkedIn Sales Navigator is an excellent source for finding leads, you can essentially find an infinite amount of leads. Now that we've filtered down our search, let's copy the URL and paste it inside of the API scraper. An important option to select is scrape profile/companies because you want detailed information. Otherwise, this scraper doesn't extract their email addresses. And since this is an example, we only wanted to scrape one page. So how do you now get the JSON code or turn this into JSON code? Simply you go back up and instead of selecting manual, you go to JSON. Now you can see the cookies, which was already in JSON, but also the parameters of the API scraper are turned into JSON. You can just copy everything and we can go back to N8N. So back in N8N, we're first going to be setting up the HTTP request node. This node is set to post. As you can see, what this means is we're sending something, we're posting something because we're triggering the API scraper on the other side, kind of. And if you remember back to like a second ago when I mentioned 3 things you'll be needing to set this up properly. Well, first you need the URL endpoint, which is in the API documentation.
you can just copy this because it's like general. The only thing that differs between different scrapers is the ID of the scraper, which is this. And for this particular one, this is its ID. But if you use a different scraper, you would have to change this and you can keep the rest of the URL, which brings me on to the API key. You have to like insert your credentials. Don't worry, I'm changing my API key after this. I just want to show you guys how to set it up so you can follow along from beginning to end. All we need to do is paste the JSON inside of this node. How you do that is by selecting this option, specifying the body as using JSON, and then pasting it in here. One thing to note, once you've pasted the code in here, you essentially never have to go back to the Apify scraper, because inside of the code, you can just change the URL or change other parameters as you wish. So for example, this is the URL I just copied from LinkedIn Sales Navigator after I had filtered it down, but I can just change out this URL for a new one with new filters, and I would never have to go back to Apify. So it's just a one and done setup essentially. So now the HTTP node is completely set up. I have my credentials, I have the endpoint, and I have the JSON body with all the parameters which are needed for the scraper to run. If I would now press test step, the Apify scraper would turn on, but I'll showcase that later on in the video. Now, let's say we would have triggered the Apify scraper and it would start running, and after a while it would have scraped the LinkedIn Sales Navigator page and it would return us some data, which is in this case called a data set. We want to retrieve the data set, so we want to bring that data inside of our N8N workflow. So inside this HTTP node, you might notice that there's a little difference. We're not sending a body, we're not sending any JSON code. That's not necessary because we're only retrieving data, so we don't need to send anything. All we need to retrieve the data is the correct endpoint URL, and the credentials in this case are API key. Now I'll quickly show you a test run and kind of explain what happens. Okay, so what happened is that I pressed to test this workflow to do a test run. So we sent some signal to the Apify scraper, and you can see on the right side it worked. So it also outputted us a default dataset ID. Please remember this because we're going to be needing this specific dataset ID in the next HTTP node. And it triggered the scraper inside of Apify. So I'll quickly show you what that looks like. So here in Apify at the top, you can see that the scraper is running. That's because we triggered it from inside of our N8N workflow, and it is going to take a while, meaning that while it is running, the dataset ID is still empty because it hasn't scraped any data and there's no data to be collected. Which brings me on to explaining the rest of the flow. Let me first quickly dive into the HTTP node set to get, which job it is to kind of retrieve the data set. So for the person paying close attention, you can see that what was grayed out is now green. That means it's now valid because there's some output earlier on in the flow. So what we did, what this output is, or what is in green, is the dataset ID created by triggering the scraper. That is also why this is a variable. And if you look closely, Y and Z matches Y and Z. This is a variable because every time you trigger the scraper, a new dataset ID is generated, and we don't want to manually have to copy and paste each individual dataset. We want that to be collected automatically, and that's why you use this expression. For those not familiar with code, it looks a lot more difficult than it is. How you get this is, I can just delete it for you guys and show you. You just grab it from the left side, paste it in here, and you would have the same. So you don't have to type this out yourself or do some deep dive internet search to figure out how to get this. You can just pull it from the left side, paste it in there, and you're done. As I said, and as I showed you, the scraper was still running, meaning there's no data set or there's no data to be retrieved. In that case, if you set it to always output, it would output an item, but an empty item. And then to check later on if there is actually some data at that point in time to be retrieved, we have to do a little workaround. So first we're using a code. I always read in the comments of my YouTube videos that people are a bit scared when it comes to code, but once again, this is very straightforward. All this code does, and I wrote it down in here, is check if the item it has as input gotten from the previous node is empty. If it is empty, it outputs not ready. If it isn't empty, it just outputs all of the items to be passed through. But in this case, it wasn't ready, so the output is not ready. Then we have set up a if node. The if node checks the output from the previous node, which was in this case not ready. So if the JSON status, which is once again just what I took from here and pasted here, is not equal to not ready, it would go to the true branch, but because it is equal to not ready, it goes to the false branch, which triggers a wait node, which is set to a time interval. In this case, the time interval is, I believe, 2 minutes. So this wait node would actually wait 2 minutes before sending all the information back to the merge node, which would then trigger the HTTP node again to ask it again to retrieve the data. The data would then be ready. So all of the items would be in here. They would be passed through here. It would not output, not ready this time, but it would just output data. So this would also be true instead of false, because the output from this would not equal not ready, and it would be outputted to our CRM. Because scraping leads, and especially all of the information from those leads, takes quite a while, I will save both you and me some time, and I'll show you what it would look like if it would retrieve a data set which is indeed already done, finished. Okay, so as I said, if the data set was ready, it would fetch all of the information. Don't know why it's taking a while, because it probably is a lot. That would look something like this for this particular scraper. So it would have their job title, company name, profile URL, job description, etc., etc. It would pass it on to the code node, which would say, okay, there is actually something, so not ready is not needed, which would pass it on to the if node, which would then say, okay, not ready is not included in the output, which would then output all of the items to our CRM, which would look something like this. As I said, I use Airtable as my CRM. So inside of the Airtable, which is essentially just like Google Sheets, I've set up the table in the following way, like first name, full name to be uploaded, their email address, title, company name, but also their personal LinkedIn URL, their company LinkedIn URL, and their company website. And you can see that everything was present inside of the data. So his first name is Michael, his personal LinkedIn URL, his email address. So we have an address to send an email to. We have his company website, which we can use to scrape and enrich the lead. And the same goes for his LinkedIn URL. We can see that he is the founder of the company. So he's actually the decision maker we want to be targeting. Now you have the leads inside of your CRM. You still need to enrich them. Enriching just means gathering data on the lead. And why would you need that data? Well, you need that data because you want to write a personalized email to them. Cold outreach is all about personalization, not sending bulk emails. So with just the email address, you have very little. You want to do personalized outreach because that success rate is many, many, many times higher. So what you could do next is just connect it to this snippet of a workflow. All of these snippets that you see on screen are inside of the School community. What this part of the workflow does is it takes the LinkedIn organization URL. As you can see, I just dragged it in from the left, pasted it here, and it fetches me all of the HTML. I'll show you guys quickly. So as I said, it fetches me the HTML from the LinkedIn organization page. It then filters all of that HTML into readable text. As you can see, the HTML is on the left side. There's a lot of code, which we don't need, and it's also wasted input tokens if you would input it into a large language model. We use this code, which simply filters out all of the unnecessary code inside of the HTML code and returns us plain text. You can see the plain text on the output side. This is all of the text that is on the LinkedIn organization page. You can check it out for yourself if you want to verify. And what we would do next is we would ask a large language model, OpenAI in this case, to analyze all of that data from the LinkedIn page and answer me some questions or write me a summary. I'll quickly go over the prompt so you guys get a better understanding. So I've asked it to analyze the scraped LinkedIn profile data of a company and then to output me the company insight. So I've asked it to summarize the company's stated mission and vision. You can see that over here. I've asked it to output recent posts by the company. You can see that here in recent updates. And I've asked it to output the number of employees and like their business model, which you can see at the bottom. Why would you need that information and what can you do with that information? Well, you could plug this onto another large language model, which would take all of the output, like the entire analysis of the business, and write a personalized email opener to be used in the first cold email you send out to the lead, which just increases your chances of a reply massively because it makes it look like you've done your research into the company and you actually know what you're talking about. Little does he know, it has all been automated. What you could even do is, instead of linking this directly to a large language model node to write a personalization, you could link it to scrape the company website first, gather all that data, which also features oftentimes testimonials. You could then attach this to a large language model node, which would summarize everything from the company LinkedIn profile and the website to create a very comprehensive picture. And another large language model node would read that comprehensive description, extract the most relevant topic to write a personalized line about, and then plug it onto this to write the personalized line to get even better results. I just mean to say that you can plug and play with this however you'd like. You can make it as complicated as you want. Possibilities are literally limitless. I just wanted to give you guys an idea of what was possible and to show you how I would use this or how I use this in my day-to-day business. But all right, that is it. You now have a fully automated system to extract high-quality leads from LinkedIn Sales Navigator, completely hands-free. Besides personalization, the other big factor in cold outbound email actually being successful is starting the right people. This is not something I've touched on in previous videos, I don't think, but in this case, in this workflow you see on screen, is a specific use case where I'm targeting founders only. And what do founders like to talk about? Founders like to talk about their company and their success. So this workflow does exactly that. We'll be writing a personalized email opener, which gives them a pat on the back on how good they've been able to grow their business in the amount of years since it has been founded. And for me, this has driven tremendous results. I've been running this campaign for like a month now, and it's actually looking to be one of my most successful campaigns. Now, let's dive into the workflow and see how everything's set up. So here in N8N, you can see the workflow that I've built. It is triggered by a webhook, which for the purpose of this video, I've deactivated because I just wanted to show you one example. But you have to imagine this being triggered by a webhook. Then it pulls the lead from Airtable, which I use as my CRM, but this can be anything. This can be HubSpot, whatever you prefer, whatever you're using. It's just that I'm using Airtable, so I also won't be diving into it too much today. Just know that a change in the Airtable, so me checking a checkbox, which triggers the webhook, then goes on to pull all the record information from the lead. Well, in this case, I've done one record ID, and the lead is Scott Irwin. You can see this is everything that's in my CRM. Something similar could be in yours, depending on where you got the lead information from or where you got the lead list from. Then it uses a HTTP request node, simply using the LinkedIn company URL. What this HTTP request node does is it retrieves all of the HTML from the company LinkedIn profile. So you can see here on the right side, there is a lot of code, so it's quite messy. But if you look closely over here, for example, you can see their follower count, a description of the company, posts are in there, everything's in there. Well, of course, this isn't as legible as we want it to be. So we move on to the code node, which literally says remove HTML LinkedIn page. I've named it like that. Here in the code node, we use the input from the left side. So we use all the HTML we've gotten from the company LinkedIn profile page. We filter it using this code to get the output we see on the right side. As you can see, it is the same text that was included in the HTML, but 99% of the HTML has been filtered. So it's much more easy to read for the large language model, which will be further down in this flow, to read and analyze and actually answer the questions we wanted to answer. When it comes to the code, this is the code I wrote myself with the assistance of ChatGPT. Save yourself some time, pause this video, write down this code for yourself. As you can see, it does quite an amazing job of filtering all the dirty HTML that's on the left side, on the input side, and outputting, I've named it plain text, but outputting all of the text that is actually on the page, and it includes everything we're interested in. Moving on,
to the first large language model of this flow. As you can see, there are many, but let me go over them one by one. So for the model, I have used ChatGPT 4o Mini. Let me give you some quick context about what this large language model node actually does. So as you can see on the left side, and what we just talked about, we have extracted all of the information that was present on the company LinkedIn profile page, which was this dirty HTML, along with all the text. Then we've filtered out the HTML to retrieve only the text. And now we are asking the large language model to analyze the text, so analyze their company LinkedIn profile and answer questions that we have. Just like I do in my previous videos, I won't really be going over the prompt that I've given the large language model for too long, because the questions that you'll be asking can be very specific. I mean, this is for the services I use this for, so that's why I want to get these answers. But it might be that you're looking for some complete different information, so it isn't as valuable to you to copy the prompt word for word, but I'll show it to you so you can copy it, so you can pause the video and copy it for yourself anyways, to kind of give yourself some starting point. Let me give you guys some context of the structure of this LLM, how I prompted it. Well, for the all-encompassing one, I use a system prompt, N8N classifies system prompts the following way, usually used to set the model's behavior or context for the next user message. So as you can see, it's just globally me saying or telling me the role the LLM has to play for the day and what I want it to do. And then in the next one, which is a user message, I describe the task and exactly what I want it to be the output. Once again, if you like to use this as a foundation for your own prompt, pause the video and copy it for yourself. Something that you might notice is that the bottom of the prompt, there is a piece of JSON code. The only thing this JSON code is for is because I want the output of this LLM to always be the same. Why do I want it to always be the same? Well, let's say further down the line, or for a instance personalization, I only want the posts to be analyzed and to be picked out the most interesting one to write a personalization about. I want to be able to extract these and input them into the next node. And if the name of whatever this output is not consistent, then there would be an error. So let's say this time it is outputted as content. And if the JSON wasn't present in my prompt, next time it could be outputted as text, for example. But then the node doesn't recognize the input because it isn't named in the same way. So to save yourself a lot of time and a lot of headache, and also save myself a lot of time, a lot of headache, you want the output to be in a JSON. So that also means you have to think this button here down on your screen. And then lastly, you also need to give it some input. So as I already said, we used the cleaned text as input so it can read through it, analyze it, and output the answer to the questions we've asked, which you can see on the right side. Interesting for today's video is that we've asked it to extract the exact number of employees. You can see it here down the bottom. Why we want to do that is something I'll go over a bit later. But this is something that I'm very proud of, and it's a very interesting way of personalization. I haven't seen it too much, but I do think, and I have seen, because I've been trying this out for myself, that it is very much successful. And then onto the code node. I know from previous messages I've received that people always get a bit anxious when I talk about code nodes. But once again, this was created with the help of my good friend ChatGPT. It's a pretty straightforward one. So what this one does is, since the output of the previous node is JSON, you can see it is all segmented. So this would make it very difficult for us to input everything into the next large language model, for example, to summarize or do whatever with it. So we want to combine this all into one piece of text. That is what this code is for. I won't dive too deep into it because I don't think it's that interesting. This was just a little back and forth between myself and ChatGPT to come up with this code. You can see on the right side, it says exactly the same things. So for example, mission, Cambridge Partners beliefs, and here mission, Cambridge Partners beliefs. But instead of everything being its own standalone input, it is now fused into one piece of text, which once again makes it easier further down the line. Okay, onto something that hasn't been featured too often on my YouTube channel, which is using a API to scrape, in this case, someone's personal LinkedIn profile. The scraper that I used is available on Appify. I'll show you the webpage in a second. So here in Appify, which is just a giant marketplace for scrapers, if you aren't familiar, just look up LinkedIn profile scraper made by Curious Coder. There is a free trial available, but I've rented it for $25 a month, which isn't that expensive, as you might understand. Here again, quite a lot of code, which might confuse some of you, but if you go to the information tab here on the right side, it'll guide you through how to get started, how to set this up, and how to get everything you'll need. Then what you need to do is press on JSON, copy all of this code, and paste it into the HTTP request node inside of N8N. So now we're back in N8N, so everyone follows along. Then we press on this next HTTP request node, which is set to post. Why is it set to post? Well, it's set to post because we want to trigger an API. We want to send like a message to the scraper to get started. So the JSON you just copied from the Appify webpage, you paste it in here, and then all the way at the bottom, there is a URL. So what you can see here in green, I'll pull it up so you can see it more clearly. What you can see here in green is a expression. This is based on the information we pulled from the CRM. So here on the left side, one of the first nodes in the workflow was to pull the leads information from the CRM. Well, in my case, the CRM I use is, the CRM I use is Airtable. So, and because the LinkedIn profile URL is different for every lead you try to enrich, this needs to be a variable. So what I've just done is I've deleted this because there will be something here if you paste the code from the Appify scraper and just paste this in there. And you can see on the right side what this actually says. Well, it's the same as the LinkedIn profile URL, but let's say I would be doing Tim Cook, for example. I would pull Tim Cook from my leads, then this piece of code would also output like Tim Cook on the right side. So it would actually trigger the right personal LinkedIn profile. Then you might be wondering why there is a wait node. Well, the thing is, when you trigger a scraper, the scraper might take a bit. It takes a bit to run and catch all the data from the profile. So that's why I've pasted a wait node. There is not really another way of circumventing or getting the information from the Appify scraper to say it's completed. So just a wait node set to 1 minute is what I found from my experience to be more than enough. And it doesn't really matter because you can just trigger a lot of flows simultaneously. Then of course we need to catch the data or retrieve the data, from the Appify scraper. We do this by utilizing another HTTP node set to get. If you remember, the last one was set to post to trigger the Appify scraper, and this one is set to get the information from the Appify scraper. So you have to paste this URL. Once again, this is a variable because the dataset ID that you get as a result from the successful scrape is different each and every person you scrape. That's it. And then you see here on the right side, Scott Irwin, which is the name of the person, and everything we could find on his complete LinkedIn profile. So a URL to his cover image, to his profile image, not that it's of any use. His complete occupation history, well, everything he posted about, his education. In this case, there are no certifications or honors he mentioned on his profile. And then, which you can't do any other way, is get the entire about section he has written about himself, which can be of use whenever you want to write a personalization about someone, because this is literally their life story. Is maybe a bit much, but you know what I mean. Which brings us on to the third code node. Once again, if you look on the left, you can see that all of the pieces of information are split, so they're all standalone. Very difficult for a future LLM node to process this and actually make something meaningful from this. So what I've done is written this piece of code. As you can see, it's really easy. to get me this output, which just, the only thing it does is put everything from the left side, which is separated into one large piece of text. It contains all the information that was also over here. This just makes it readable for everything else that follows in this flow. Then, of course, we don't need all of the information from his LinkedIn profile. We may have some specific questions we want to have answered. That's what we use this large language model for. Once again, set to 4.0 mini, because I found that 4.0 mini is still more than capable to do things like this. And it is also very cheap, because you have to bear in mind there are some costs involved when enriching a person using AI, because the tokens, the input tokens and the output tokens just cost you money. Running a flow like this might be interesting for some of you people to know, is honestly like 2 cents. So 1,000 people would be $2, which is very cost effective, especially if you translate it into the time it would cost you to research 1,000 people and craft a personalized opener for each and every one of them. Once again, the prompts are split up into system and user prompts. So the system prompt is more of me giving the large language model a role it needs to play and what I want it to kind of do. And then here in the user node, it is the task. In this specific case, I ask it to give a summary of the headline and about section of his LinkedIn profile. I want a career timeline, and I want to identify the industry he is in. Here, once again, JSON, because I want the output to always be the same. Please, if you're building a system like this, be wary of the fact that having the output always be the same, or in the same structure, is very important, and it can save you a ton of time. Probably figuring out how this works costed me like 10 hours. So please do me a favor and save yourself those 10 hours by just asking ChatGPT to write the output into a JSON format and pasting it in here. Then once again, at the bottom, you can see the input. Well, in this case, the input was from the previous nodes, which turned all of the segmented data into one large piece of text. And you can see, even though it may look messy to us, the ChatGPT node is more than capable of figuring out what this all means and answering our questions. So you can see it outputted their career timeline, the industry is in, and it wrote me a little summary about who Scott Irwin is. Well, the lead in this case, we're enriching. Then we want to take both the information from the company LinkedIn profile and all the information from the personal LinkedIn profile and fuse those two together. That's what happens over here. Then, because this is once again outputted as a JSON, we want to put all of the output into one large piece of text yet again, because that just makes it a lot easier for the large language model, this one, the summarized input one, to read. So as you can see, again, on the left side, everything is standalone, and we want it to be one large piece of text. This is actually the exact same code as I used in the second code node over here. So if you pause the video, copy the code, you can just paste it in here. Don't worry, you don't have to redo everything again. And you can see it's plain text. Everything that was on the left side is now on the right side, but instead of it all being segmented, it is fused into one. And then for the second to last code node, what we want to do, what we want to achieve, is to fuse the information from the company LinkedIn profile together with the personal LinkedIn profile, once again into one large piece of text. So for the final ChatGPT node we're going to be using is to summarize both the company LinkedIn profile and the personal LinkedIn profile and extracting the most interesting and relevant information, which can vary depending on the lead you're enriching, because some people post very little on their personal LinkedIn profile, some people post very little on their company LinkedIn profile. So there can be discrepancies. That's why we have to do it this way. Fusing these two texts together is what we do over here. And in this code, as you can see, it just takes the input from, well, I haven't named it properly, but you understand it if you look at the workflow. Fuse input into one item 3, which is duplicate, and fuse input into item 1. And it just combines the text of those two inputs. And as you can see, combined text. So here they are separately, source 1 and source 2. And a combined text is, if you scroll down, just everything together. So I already talked about it briefly, but then we have this summarize input, which is the large keynote of this flow. What this does is summarize the company LinkedIn profile information and just give me a brief summary, as you can see on the right side. There are some basic stuff that you might want to use in future sequences of your cold outreach. So let's say you want to identify their industry, their mission and values, product and service summarized, etc., etc. Something notable here is specific achievement, because I've prompted it to derive a specific achievement the company has had based on like posts on the company LinkedIn profile. This is something that I would advise you using for crafting personalized email openers. Something that I've used in the past with great success. But this video is more about showcasing other ways of using personalization in email openers. And as you can see, all of the output is once again in JSON format, because you might want to use this or upload this to your CRM, to your email provider separately to paste it in as variables inside of email templates. So for the third time, we fused the JSON from the input into one piece of text to make it easier for potential future LLMs. This is just the use case of using the code nodes, which then brings us on to the final large language model node. You might be surprised to note that I'm using Claude to actually write the cold email openers instead of ChatGPT. From my experience, and I mean, it's an ongoing process because both companies keep building out their AI capabilities. For now, from my experience, Claude is better at copywriting than ChatGPT, and ChatGPT is better at analyzing data better than Claude. So let me dive into this node to show you what I've done to get the output. So first of all, the input is the fused together text from the company business profile and the LinkedIn personal profile, which we've covered a few notes ago. So it has all the information about when the company was founded, how many employees it has now, the industry that it's in, etc., etc. And then we only use one prompt, which is a system prompt. I'll show it to you right now. What I do is I give it very clear rules. So I want to use 5th grade language. But of course, most, if not all, business founders are more than capable of understanding language from higher grades than 5th grade. But it's just like a kind of a rule of thumb to keep your language simple, so it's easier for people to read. They don't have to read it twice. It just makes, well, reading the email a lot more pleasant. I give it like the tone of the messaging. I tell it to use congrats instead of congratulations, which is a big thing because, well, congratulations always sound so formal and a bit robotic. And I tell it to use a 30-word maximum, and the compliment should only be focused on the business. This is something you can tweak for yourself. I mean, it could also be that you want the compliment to be more focused on the person, how they have grown the company or whatever, whichever use case you use this workflow for. And then I've given the model some examples. Giving the examples of the output just saves you a lot of time because you can prompt it whatever way you want. The LLM will just run with it. And sometimes it's like banging your head into a wall because it just doesn't give you the output you want unless you give it some examples. So I've given it some examples. Now, let me show you the output it came up with. So the company of the person we've enriched is called Camber Partners. Well, we've already seen before right here that it has 15 employees, which you can see right here, which is what we extracted from the company LinkedIn profile, which I went over quite a long time ago now, because this video has been going on for long enough. Then we can also see when the company was founded. So how long ago? April 22. And that's all being used. Here you can see the 15% and the 2020 into the cold email opener. So let me read it for you. Seeing how Camera Partners has grown into a 15-person team since launching in 2020 or making such an impact in software investing is really inspiring, because software investing is also a variable we have enriched from both his LinkedIn personal profile and his company profile. I can press on test step so I can show you a different outcome. So here you can see it came up with something else. Congrats on Camera Partners' growth in software investing since 2020. Building a 15-person team while focusing on product-led growth companies is truly impressive. As I said, the purpose of this workflow is to craft a highly personalized compliment aimed towards a founder of a company, because we're only targeting founders with my lead list. I'm only targeting founders because they're decision makers and they're usually the easiest people to convince they are in need of growth, which is exactly what I can provide. And I think this does the job. I've seen from the results from the marketing campaign, the cold outreach campaign I've been running for over a month now, using the system to craft me openers, that it has been really successful. People just like the output. So to wrap things up, I just want to emphasize once again that there are two things which are most important when it comes to cold outreach. One is the targeting, but targeting can be very simple because it's just thinking about who might be the decision maker in charge of okaying either going ahead with your product or your service, which in the use case I just shown you is for me was founders. And besides that, it's personalization. You can get data from a lot of places. I think LinkedIn is the most valuable source because people post a lot of stuff either on their personal profile, or especially on their company profile. And since you want business about their company, that's where you can get it. So I think we've covered most, if not all of the basics to allow you to build whatever N8N automation you can think of for either your personal use or for your business. If you're anything like me, you don't just want to play around building workflows just for fun. You actually want to put them to use or maybe even sell them and implement them for other businesses. In this video, I'm going to show you part of the system that got me my first B2B clients a couple of months ago. For getting my first clients, I used cold outbound emailing. It's still the highest ROI sales channel out there. I won't dive too deep into the benefits of cold outbound emailing, but you can either Google them yourself or you'll have to trust me on it for the day. One of the most important factors when it comes to cold emailing is personalization. Imagine you receive a very generic business email in your inbox, maybe not even using your first name, then being like, hello there, we can build you a better website, get in touch with us, do you have time next week? You would skip it. I would skip it. I can guarantee you would most likely skip it yourself. Now imagine that same email, just the opening line being something very specific, something you posted yourself on your company LinkedIn page last week or maybe a month ago, being like, hey, congratulations on your expansion to the Dutch market. We can build websites that better fit your customers' needs. There would be a much higher possibility of you actually being intrigued reading that opening line. So opening the email and maybe replying to them, being like, oh, wow, they've actually done their research into me, or they've actually done their research into my company. Let's give these guys a chance. The system you see on screen does exactly what I've just been talking about. It scrapes their company LinkedIn profile, it extracts their posts, achievements, etc. And it crafts a very highly personalized opener to an email, cold email. As always, before I get into how you can replicate this for yourself, I'll first show you a quick test run by clicking on Test Workflow. In the bottom right, we can see workflow executed successfully. Let's see what the LLM came up with. Great work revamping 30 plus SaaS websites in just 4 years. Some pretty cool, highly personalized stuff, actually. Now let's dive into the nitty gritty and let me show you how you can replicate this for yourself to get the same outcome. Before I get into explaining how to set this up in N8N, I'll first show you where I got the lead information from, which is my Airtable. Let's say you buy a large lead list on the internet, or maybe scrape the leads yourself using a Apollo scraper or whichever software you prefer. You put it into your CRM, it might look something like this. So you have their first name, their full name, email address, title, or the job they have at the company, the industry they're in, location they operate in, LinkedIn URL, etc., etc. For the example of today, I've simply copied the record ID and put it into the Airtable node. I'll show you how I've done that right now. So back in N8N, we go to the Airtable node. And as I just said, I've copied the record ID over here. If you're using webhooks to start your workflow, which I would highly recommend, by the way, the record ID would be a variable instead of a static one, which I'm using right now. In previous videos, I've shown how you can do this quite easily. And also in the next notes, I'll highlight how you can just drag and drop from the input side to fill in the necessary fields. Then I simply click test step. And on the right side, we can see the exact same information that we just saw in our CRM. We see the first name of the lead, we see their company website, their LinkedIn URL, the location, and here we see the full name. Next, we want to retrieve their company LinkedIn profile. Because if businesses have anything to share or celebrate with their followers, this is their platform of choice. We do this by utilizing a HTTP node. As I was just talking about, in this case, we use a variable because, as I just said, it can be that your lead would be a variable as you're not always researching the same lead. I just dragged the LinkedIn organization URL from the left side into the field because I already have the URL. Let's say you don't have a URL, a quick Google search or a quick Boolean search would get you the same result. On the right side, you can see a very big HTML file, which is all the HTML it retrieved from the company LinkedIn profile. And the next step will parse all this HTML, filter it, and only output the text. I'll show you. Next up is the code node. You can pause the video and copy this code. I can promise you it's gonna save you a lot of time and a lot of back and forth with ChatGPT because I've already done that for you. As input, we have used the HTML from the previous node. And as you can see on the right side, as I just promised, it has filtered all the HTML and only returned us the plain text, which makes it much easier for the next node, the ChatGPT node, to actually digest and analyze the information and give us whatever we ask it to output. And now that we're done with the boring stuff, let's get into the fun stuff, which of course involves AI. First, we clean the company name. You might think, oh, why do you have to do that? You already have the company name. Yes, of course, if you get a lead list or if you scrape your leads from the internet, you already most likely have the company name. The only thing is usually that company name includes their LLC or Inc. And real humans don't talk like that. We never refer to a company as Google LLC or generic company name. That's why we tell the AI to use all the input we just got from the filtered LinkedIn profile, search it, and reason a decent, normally used company name, in this case, Beetle. In the next node, we ask ChatGPT to extract all the posts, achievements, and success stories from the LinkedIn company profile. I've done that with this simple prompt. I won't go over the prompt because, well, as I can see, it is a personal preference. You can adjust this however you'd like. It's pretty straightforward. I would just copy and paste it if I were you and maybe make some adjustments whenever you see fit. Once again, the input is a variable. I took this input from the remove HTML return text node, which was this previous code node. I'll remove everything, drag it from the left, paste it here, and highlighted in green, you can see it's correct. On the right side, let's go over the output quickly. It returned recent posts, it returned achievements, and it probably returned everything else I asked it to do. I'm quite sure, notable achievements, as you can see here. I also, as you can see, it mentions the timestamps. Timestamps are very important when crafting a relevant opener, because, well, time is of course one of the factors that makes something actually relevant. And the more relevant your opener, the higher the chances are of them actually opening the email and of them replying to the email. Finally, I use a HTTP node. It's set to get, but it should be set to post, to upload the personalized opener to a email software that I use. I personally use Instantly, but you can use whatever one you prefer. It all works the same. And I update the record of the lead that we retrieved all the way back here with the new information of the lead company name. You can add maybe all the LinkedIn profile text or maybe only the posts, and of course the personalization for future reference. Let's say the lead doesn't respond, maybe a few months down the line, you'd like to reach out again, and you don't have to do the research all over again. You can just look at what you've already got and send them a quick email. This is the exact system that got me my first clients, so I hope it does the same for you. However, if you'd still like to outsource your sales department, that's definitely possible. I sell automated sales systems to companies, to B2B companies to be exact. And over the past couple of months, I've been generating tons of leads for my clients, and they're more than satisfied. I can tell you that. I'll keep you guys up to date with the latest and greatest ways to improve your own business processes.
Let me start with a question. Have you ever felt like finding quality leads is one of the hardest parts of growing your business? Well, you're definitely not alone. Like, many businesses waste hours, even weeks, chasing cold prospects who were never really interested in their services to begin with. Traditional methods like blasting generic emails to massive lists just don't work anymore. I'm not sure if they've ever worked. However, they're time-consuming, inefficient, and let's face it, they often lead to dismal results. What I've noticed is that a lot of people approach lead generation all wrong. They'll target very generic and they'll target prospects based on surface level metrics like job titles or company size. For example, they might decide to reach out to all marketing directors at companies with over 500 employees. You might be wondering, well, what's wrong with that? Well, the problem is that this approach doesn't take into account whether these businesses actually need your services. Meaning you end up spending time and resources on people who don't even know they have a problem, or worse, aren't interested in solving it. So, of course, you're wondering, well, how do I fix this? Well, you fix this by flipping the script. So instead of a wide net, focus on companies that are already showing signs of a specific need. I'll show you what I mean. If you run a sales agency, just like I do, don't just target decision makers, but target businesses that are actively hiring for sales development representatives, like SDRs, because you know they're on the lookout to expand their sales team. Why do this? Well, because companies investing in these roles are clearly focused on improving their sales process. They're much more likely to see value in what you offer. It's all about identifying pain points. Like, for instance, a company hiring an SEO specialist is likely struggling with website performance. The same goes for a business looking for a new CTO. They may have technical infrastructure challenges, which, if that's what you solve, that's a perfect time to step in. By focusing on these signals, like job postings on LinkedIn or Indeed, you can tailor your outreach to address their specific needs. This makes your message not just relevant, but it makes it irresistible. Okay, you guys probably have had enough of me rambling. Let's dive into the workflow. What you can see on screen is a workflow that I've personally used to this day to get me quite a lot of clients, because as I said, I'm targeting pain points. I'm targeting people who are actively looking to make a change, who are actively looking to hire people to do the things that I can do for them. So that's the perfect time to step in. The workflow is quite long. That's because there are some tricky parts. That's why I've tried to break it down into 5 different segments. So first, we'll scrape companies who are actively hiring for certain roles. Well, in this case, I'm using SDRs as an example. Then we'll have to find their email address, because that isn't part of the job application. We'll have to enrich the lead and use AR to personalize. And then lastly, write an email and send the email. Let's start at the beginning. We scrape for companies hiring for SDRs. We scrape LinkedIn, because LinkedIn is one of the platforms, just like Indeed, where most companies post job applications if they have some. But as you can see, there are 3,000 United States looking for an SDR, so plenty of people for us to reach out to. Problem with doing this manually is that's going to be very time consuming. That's why we made this part of the automation, to scrape the list of companies and jobs you just saw. I use a scraper, which can be found on Apify. For those who aren't familiar, Apify is a giant marketplace for scrapers. You've seen a video of me using it for an Apollo scraper, but you can also have an Instagram scraper, Facebook post scraper, Cheerio scraper, G2 scraper, Crunchbase scraper, you name it, it's probably on here. So how to get the scraper to work is actually quite simple. It should have only taken 2 nodes, which is this HTTP node, which is set to post, and this one, which is set to get. But there are some other things I had to add to this flow to make it work without any manual input. I'll get to that in a second. First, let me show you how you can actually trigger the scraper. To trigger the scraper, we use an API. For those who aren't familiar, an API is simply like a bridge between 2 systems, which lets one system, which is our automation, talk with another one, which is the scraper. For that, all we need is a URL. You can find this URL on the Apify API documentation. It's very straightforward, so I won't go over it in any detail. A thing to note is that what you see here, I'll highlight it for you, is the ID of the scraper. So each scraper has their own ID, of course, and this just tells the Apify API which actor it has to communicate with. So once you send the trigger to the scraper to start running, all we have to do is retrieve the data, retrieve the data set. For that, we use a variable, which is also an ID. You can see it, it's this number. It's a variable because each run of the scraper you do, the data set ID is gonna be different. So it needs to be a variable. You can see that only on the first and second run, there was no information to be outputted, meaning data wasn't ready yet. Only the third run, there actually was some. So Once this HTTP node is done, which literally takes a split second because all it has to do is like send a trigger to a URL, this node is immediately activated and is told to retrieve the data. But 9 out of 10 times, the data isn't going to be ready in a split second because the scraper needs to start running and needs to finish, which can take a while depending on what you're asking from it. That's why these 4 nodes here are in place. So as I just showed, inside of this HTTP node, you could see that the first 2 runs were Dutch. So if that's the case, this code node just checks if there's an output. If there isn't one, it'll send out not ready. As you can see, the status is not ready. Then it goes to this if node, which checks if not ready is present. Well, if it isn't present, it's told to wait and then rerun the flow until there's actually some data to be retrieved and we can continue on. In this case, you can see it took 2 rounds or 3 tries actually before the data was ready. So now you know why, even though triggering an API and retrieving the data is very straightforward, there were some necessary additions to this part of the flow, which also concludes the first section. Don't worry, the other ones won't take as long. Now we need to find the email address. We find the email address by using some very useful software called Email Finder. Email Finder is accessible also through an API, which is why we can link it to our workflow. What an email finder does is, based on a domain, it can find email addresses which are linked to that domain. So since we don't have the email address of the person who posted the job application on LinkedIn, we'll have to just do a domain search and find all email addresses linked to that company. Let me quickly show you what we actually did retrieve, because that's what I forgot just now. So here you can see the data set and what it contained. I'll show you in a schema so it's clearer for everyone. So we have the post ID of the application when it was published. In this case, the salary isn't present. We see the company name. We also have the company URL, which isn't the URL to the company website, but this is the URL to the company LinkedIn page because, well, the job was posted on LinkedIn. And then lastly here, it says poster full name. In some cases, there is a name actually here, but in most cases, I would say 9 out of 10 times, there isn't a poster full name. I think that's due to privacy reasons or just because it isn't like required. And the poster full name not being present just makes our job a little bit more difficult, but it's still doable, and I'll show you how. So now you actually know what was retrieved by the scraper from the LinkedIn job post, which brings us on to finding the email address. Well, to find the email address and to trigger the API, as I just showed, we need a domain. We haven't found the domain yet because it wasn't part of the retrieved information. So we have to scrape the company LinkedIn profile to find a domain. How we do that is by using also a HTTP node. This HTTP node gets the company LinkedIn profile, HTML. So it's just, I took this from the left and pasted it over there, and it retrieved us the HTML. As always, we want to clean this because this contains a lot of code and a lot of unnecessary stuff. It just increases the amount of input tokens into the LLM, which is something we don't want. That's why this code is present. All this code does is filter out HTML. As you can see on the left side, it was very dirty, as I like to call it. And on the right side, all that remains is plain text, readable for us and also easier for the LLM. Then somewhere on the page, so somewhere within this line of text, there isn't really somewhere in here, there is the domain name and the URL of the company. So what I've done is I've written a prompt to kind of analyze this text and based on the company name, find me the most likely URL. The prompt is very straightforward. Based on the provided LinkedIn content, identify the company name and locate the website URL. Only output the URL. As input, we've given it the plain text from the left side and dragged it in once again. And you can see on the right side, the output side, that it has found for us the URL to the company homepage, which we can not only use to enrich, but we actually need to find email addresses linked to this domain. So as I mentioned before, in some cases, the LinkedIn application is present. In most cases, it isn't. If it is present, it just makes your life a bit easier because you can do a more specific search using any mail finder. If it isn't present, all we have to work with is the domain. So what we do is we take the domain, which was hedge.com, which was the result from the large language model. You can see over here. input it, and it returns us all of the email addresses which are linked to or are using this domain. You can see the entire list. There's a total of 8,000. Now that we've found all of these email addresses, that kind of concludes the second part, and all that's left is to enrich the lead. So give the large language model some information about the company, write a little personalization, and clean up the company name if necessary. And then lastly, send an email to the person. How do we enrich the lead? Well, we enrich the lead with the only information we have at this point, which is their website URL. So we fetch all of the HTML this time instead of from the LinkedIn profile page. We do this from the company website, from their homepage. This is the same code as I've inputted over here. It just filters the HTML and returns plain text, as you can see. So this is what's on their homepage. For analyzing the homepage, I just use ChatGPT 4.0 mini. I think it's more than capable and it's very inexpensive. People have told me about DeepSeek, but I haven't had the time to experiment with it. This is a very generic prompt I wrote with the assistance of ChatGPT, but you can use it as a foundation because it works perfectly fine. And then onto the questions that I'm asking it to answer. So I'm asking it to extract and organize the following information: testimonials, recent growth, and success stories. And on the right side, you can see what the output is. Well, apparently there were no testimonials on the homepage. There was some recent growth and there were some success stories, which is more than enough for us to write a personalization, which we can use as the email opener. And then once again, as input, as I probably already mentioned, I plain text from the left. So you might be wondering, why are you cleaning the company name and what does that mean? Well, in some cases, the job application post on LinkedIn contains the company name, which is like followed by limited or by Inc., for example, how they're registered. The thing is, you never want to use that in a cold email because it doesn't sound human at all. I would never reference to a company saying Tesla Inc., for example. That's why we use this. Well, in this case, Hatch was already cleaned, but if that isn't the case, it would just take it out. So let's say LLC was present or Inc. was present or limited, as I just said, it would just clean the company name so we can use a clean version of it in the email. And then we're on to the second to last large language model. Why do we need to get the first name? Well, if you remember back to where we found the email addresses contained a first name, a last name, and a domain name. We want to give the large language model the easiest job possible to make its output as consistent as possible. That's why we need this extra step to take what we just got. So we take the entire email address, which is once again input from the left side, which this variable actually translates into this. And we just ask it to return the first name if it's present. If it isn't, leave the field empty, because you'd rather say hi to someone than say hi as them at whatever, because then you already know they're not going to respond to your email. And you can see the output is Stuart because his email address was stuart.mciver. So this was a very easy cleanup, which brings us on to writing the email. Well, writing the email might be giving it a bit more credit than it deserves, because I always just tell the LLM to fill in a pre-written template. Why do I choose to pre-write an email template instead of let ChatGPT write everything? That's because, in my opinion, ChatGPT or Claude or whatever you use isn't good enough to write an entire email. That's a pretty big part of it. The other part of it is that if you're doing cold outbound, if you're doing cold emailing, or if you're doing any outreach as a business, you constantly want to improve. And how do you improve? You improve by switching up variables. Well, if you constantly let the LLM write the entire email, you can be sure that each and every email is going to be completely different from the one before. So there aren't really any metrics to test because there aren't any consistencies between the emails. So you can't really test your offer. You can't test the layout because you have no say over it, because the LLM is filling that in for you. That's why we want to take away that power of the LLM, keep it to ourselves, and just let it fill in the variables or let it fill in the blanks, which it is really good at. So before I go over the conclusion of this entire workflow, let me show you what the input was. So the input was the first name, the company name, and the result. The result is simply what we extracted from the homepage. And here is the prompt. As I already said, I wanted to fill in a template using placeholder for personalization. And I just gave it some notes on the tone, which brings us to what you guys have all been waiting for probably, is the result of all of our hard work. which is a filled-in email template, and I'll just read it to you guys briefly. Hey, Stuart, which is the first name we retrieved. A friend mentioned Hatch recently, and I've been meaning to reach out. Sounds like you're making big moves. And then here it is followed by the personalization. Congrats on the initiatives related to decarbonization and engineering solutions for the battery life cycle, by the way, which is probably something Hatch is involved with. Well, it must be because it was on their website. Saw you've got some SDR roles open and figured I'd drop you a note. This is the best part of the email because they actually have some jobs open because we verified. So we know they're looking for this. So we know this email is relevant to them. And then we just talked something about ourselves. I run an agency specializing in cold outbound, and we can handle outreach at 50 times the pace of a typical SDR, which is true. There's no human who can compete with a flow like this. Furthermore, with response rates consistently outperforming industry averages, we've helped companies like Bolt and Deliveroo create over 8 million in pipeline. Would love to explore if we could do the same for you. Free for a quick chat this week. Cheers, Clarence. This is one of the best email templates I've ever written, and this is one which works like a charm. I would highly suggest to just copy this one, use it for yourself, and see the positive replies flow in. You can start by building this automated workflow today and unlock a whole new level of efficiency for your business. AI Inbox Manager that replies to leads while you sleep. Yes, you heard that right. This system will handle email replies on autopilot. Why is this necessary? Because I know many of you face the same problem I did. Whether you're just starting out or scaling your agency, managing replies can be overwhelming and very, very time consuming. So stick around, because by the end of this video, you'll have the tools to build your own inbox automation system. Let's get into this. All right, let me paint a picture for you guys. Imagine this. You've spent days crafting the perfect cold email campaign. You hit send on that campaign and boom, leads start replying. You start seeing results. Results just like what you see on screen right now. This is a screenshot, or these are two screenshots out of my Instantly account. One of them is from a campaign I ran for a social media marketing agency, and the other one is from a campaign that I ran for a web development or a web design company. You can see that both of the reply rates were around 7%. For those who aren't familiar with cold email reply rates, that's about 2 times the market average, so I'm pretty proud of this. Sadly, not all of those replies were positive. Some weren't interested, some were asking to unsubscribe from the email list. Let's say about the average of 37.5 and 25%, let's say about 30% of those replies were positive, totaling me in 52 emails just for these 2 campaigns, meaning I had to reply to 52 emails. Well, I'm happy to reply to 52 positive emails, but it takes up a lot of time. And I also had another problem, that problem being that all my targets live in the US and I live in Amsterdam. So while they're responding 3 p.m. their time, it is 3 a.m. for me. So I would wake up to a flood of emails, and by the time I had replied, it was already too late. Leads went cold, conversations fizzled, and opportunities were lost. Now, here is the important part. In sales, speed is everything. Studies show that the faster you reply, the higher the chances of closing the deal. Those critical first few hours after a reply are golden. But in my case, let's be real, I couldn't sacrifice sleep to sit by my inbox all night hoping for a response. This is a problem I faced early in my career. I remember missing a reply from a lead who was ready to close on a $10,000 deal, but because I didn't respond until the next day, I missed that one, and let me tell you, that one stung very badly. So I thought there has to be a better way. And that is when I turned to automations. I realized I could build a system to do the heavy lifting for me, like categorize the replies, engage leads, and keep the conversation alive, all while I slept. And today I'm going to show you how to do exactly the same. Now that we have set the stage, let's talk about what we're building. The goal is simple. Create a system that manages your email replies so you don't have to. This system will handle replies while you sleep, keep your leads engaged, and ensure you never lose out on potential deals, just like I did all the way at the beginning. So here is the big picture. For those who are not familiar with N8N, which is the software you see on screen, which I use as the glue to build all my automations with, I've tried to break it down. That's why I'm using these post-its over there to kind of break down the entire system you see into much more easily digestible steps. So first of all, because this is an email inbox management, we can only manage emails that we receive. So we wait for an incoming email that happens over here. Then the email needs to be classified. It needs to be put into a category. In this example, I only chose 3 categories to keep it a bit simpler, but you can work this out as you go along. But this system, as you see it right here live on screen, takes care of 90% of what it needs to do. Then we'll have the AI write an email response based on the email they received. So it needs to read the email properly. And then lastly, we have to send the email. For sending the email, I always used Instantly. So I'll show you guys a quick preview of how that works and how to set up the API. Now that you guys have an understanding of what you can expect from this system, and I've seen a little bit of a breakdown, let me dive into how you can copy this for yourself and set this up for yourself. So if this would be a live system, it would be triggered by a webhook. But because it's very difficult to show you guys an example based on a webhook, I'm using an API from Instantly to get me the emails. I'll quickly show you guys the API documentation on the Instantly website because it's very straightforward. Here you go. I mean, you can read through the documentation if you'd like, but all you'd really need to do from here is copy this code, this C URL code, take it like there, and we open the HTTP request node, and we just import the curl or C URL. I'm not really sure how you say it. And then this is all filled in automatically. In the API documentation, you can see specifics of what this all means. So let's say you only want the latest of the thread, of the email thread, then you can only fetch that specific email. You can set campaign IDs if you only want to receive or fetch emails from certain campaign IDs, you name it. And on the right side, the output side, we see what our API call returned. In this case, it was a test email I sent to myself. Here, Clarence Knapp, and what the email entailed. Moving on, this is a step you can skip, but because I always like to have everything synchronized, so I also want my email system to be synchronized with my CRM, and for my CRM I use Airtable. So I get the lead info because I need the record ID of the specific lead, well in this case the lead being myself, but I need the record ID to further down the line if I want to update the status of the lead based on the email that they sent me or the email they replied with. I need the record ID to then update it and update the correct record, as you can see. But I'll go over that in a bit, so don't worry. So once you've received the email from Instantly and it's inside of your workflow, we need to filter the HTML. This is a returning topic in my videos because most of the time something needs to be filtered somehow. In this case, it is the email. As we can see on the left side, this is the body of the email, like the entire thread, so also all replies. And a lot of this, everything within brackets and stuff, is all code we don't need. So we use this, very similar to what I use to filter HTML of websites. And we get the filter text on the right, which is only the text, email addresses and dates. Continuing on, because in an email thread, there is an email we send and there's a reply. So to keep things as simple for the large language models in this workflow as possible, I wanted to split out the body of the email into each individual email that was sent back and forth. In most cases, it would just be your cold email or maybe your cold email and your follow-up and then their reply. And I wanted to split those out. That's why I added this ChatGPT node. So inside of this ChatGPT node on the left side, we can see the entire body of the email. So the latest response and all of the previous that were sent. As you can see, there were a bunch because I did some testing back and forth. And then this very simple prompt just tells the AI to split out based on some parameters and also output it as a JSON, which results in all of the emails being split separately on the right side. So for this workflow of today, we're focusing on the most recent email, which is the top one because it's in chronological order. And the content of the email was, sounds great. What is the price of all of this? Then we need to do some sentiment analysis. We need a large language model, in this case, once again, ChatGPT, to kind of read the email and maybe the thread as a whole and identify what we need to reply to. That all happens in this node over here. So I'll quickly go over the prompt for you guys. You are an email classifier designed to analyze incoming email from B2B cold outreach campaigns. Your goal is to accurately classify responses into predefined categories. Well, there are 3 categories, like ready to schedule, more info needed, or not interested. I'll go over these more in depth in a bit. And then here I just input the most recent email 0, which corresponds to, well, as I said, in chronological order, the most recent one. Then below the system prompt, I have defined the categories and I have given it some examples of the phrases that might be inside of such an email, just to make the job of the LLM a lot easier. I've done this for the ready to schedule category, I've done this for the more info needed, and I have done this for the not interested. Important thing to note is that I've only asked it to output whatever category it has assigned to the email. In this case, this was more info needed. Well, that's the same conclusion I would have drawn from the email. Sounds great. What is the price of all of this? Then I have placed a edit note. This edit field is necessary to make my life a bit easier. All I've done is taken this from the left. So I wanted to identify the content and I wanted to output the answer. So the content over there and then output more info needed, or in the case he would not be interested, output not interested, or if he sent over some dates that he was ready to schedule a meeting, then I want this to say schedule a meeting. That is because of the next node. The next node is a switch node. All this switch node does is based on the exact output of this LLM email classifier, send it down the appropriate flow. So there are 3 options, as I said. There is the ready to schedule option, there is the more info needed option, and there was the not interested option. By now, I hope it's clear that the email we received was a request for more information, namely the price. Obviously, next in the flow is another Airtable node. I already touched on the fact that here we get the record ID. So inside of my CRM, the status of this lead, so the lead that responded to my outreach, would be changed to more info needed sent. So I know that he replied to my message and there has been a reply sent back to him. So if I don't hear anything, I can follow up manually or put him into a subsequence. I'll be touching on the ready to schedule part of this flow and the not interested part of this flow a bit later on. But because this example is about the more info needed, and I also think that's the most interesting part of this workflow, I'll finish this one first. So once the status is updated of my lead inside of my CRM, I've asked this LLM, this ChatGPT node, to do a quick check. Because I've been doing business for quite a while, I have a list of frequently asked questions, which I have pre-written email responses to. And I always ask the same whenever I onboard a client. All of my clients already have existing businesses and they've had a lot of calls. They've had a lot of email communication, most likely. But let's say they just had a lot of calls and they know kind of the questions people might be asking when they tell about their services. So you can do the same thing. You'll just compile a list of all of those questions and write some pre-written responses to those to then input that into a vector database and give the large language model access to that vector database so it can read the email, identify the question in this case because there was more info needed, and then look for the pre-written response and use that response to alter it maybe a bit and then send that back to your lead. You could also, of course, skip the entire vector database and just let the AI read the email and write a response all by itself. But I found that your output is a lot more consistent if you just give it examples. And of course, consistency is what we're looking for with this. For those who are not familiar with a vector database is just like a giant storage. In this case, it's data about frequently asked questions. And you can give the large language model access to that database to quickly search for whatever it needs to fulfill the task you're asking from it. I won't be diving too much in depth about the vector database in this video. That's because I'm not really about how-tos on this channel. There's a lot of other videos on the internet about vector databases and how you can upload things to them and how you can give the large language model access to whatever you've uploaded. But if I read a lot of comments asking me to go further in depth about vector databases, I'll be sure to make a video about it. So let me know if you have any questions. Before moving on, I'll quickly go over the prompt. So the prompt, as you can see, is quite long. But what I wanted to do is to analyze the context of the email. I wanted to identify the question that's being asked and then check the vector database for a reply to that question. There is the possibility that nothing in my vector database matches that reply. And in that case, I want this to be sent off to a human via Slack, or the human being me in this case. And I also want the output to be in a JSON, as you can see on the right side. When it comes to the question about the price, I strongly suggest to not directly answer the question about the price. My pre-written answer to that would be the pricing for Emphasis, which is the name of my agency, depends on the unique needs of your business. I prefer to discuss how they can deliver the most value for your sales efforts before diving into costs. It's recommended to schedule a call. This goes for almost all information requests. Whenever someone asks more information about your services or about your cost, and you give them that answer, the possibility of them never replying again is very likely. I'm not really sure why. So instead of giving them a clear answer, always say you would love to give them more information, but you'd rather get them on a call to talk about it and talk about the value you can add, which is a lot better and gets you a lot more actual meetings, and actual meetings also resulting in more closed deals than just straight up answering the question, which I still to this day think is kind of strange. So as I just said, there is the possibility that the question being asked is not on my list, is not in my factor database. If that is the case, I want this to be sent off. I want the question to be sent off to me so I can look at it myself and write a response instead of the AI just making something up. That's why this if node is in place, because if the question is not on my list, it will output unavailable. And then the if node will see if there's an unavailable present in the response, yes or no. And if it is present, it will send me a message on Slack with the email reply from them so I can read it from my phone instead of having to go to my computer. If the unavailable is not there and there is an answer, I want the next large language model to read the information that was retrieved from my factor database and write me an email response. I'll show you the result. So the pricing of FSS services depends on the unique needs of your business. We prefer to discuss blah, blah, blah. It just turns the pre-written answer into a tailored message toward the recipient. Important thing to note is that there is some HTML in this response. I did that on purpose. As you can read in my prompt, please provide the HTML content without any backticks or code block markers. You might be wondering why. Well, this is because if you upload this message through the Instantly API without any HTML in it, it would just be one long line, which doesn't look professional at all, especially if you finished up with cheers, Clarence, for example. So be sure when you're automatically replying to emails through the Instantly API to use HTML to structure and properly format the email. So you might be wondering why after there's a wait node and why there's this Slack node. That's because let's say you just built out this system, you just copied me or you downloaded this flow out of my school community and set it up for yourself. You want to test this out because a positive reply to your outreach is very valuable. So you don't want to mess it up because it can be very costly. That's why I always suggest if you have things like this and you're testing it out, use a Slack node or a Telegram node or whatever. So what happens is that the email response written by this large language model sends the email that has written to my Slack. So for me to review. So it's kind of like a draft email. I just get it in my Slack inbox so I can check it on my phone very quickly. See, hey, does this need some touches or can it be directly sent through the Instantly API? I mean, if you run this for a few weeks, you know if there are any kinks or anything you need to tweak. And if you think there aren't any things to tweak anymore, you can just remove these Slack nodes and put the Instantly API in their place. And to answer the question about the wait nodes, well, we need this to be as human as possible. This flow would write a reply and send the reply within seconds. And the recipient of those emails would most likely be very shocked and also think something was up. Because there's no way you can read, write, and send an email within seconds. That's why we're adding the human touch and having a bit of a time delay. You can set this to like a static number, let's say 15 minutes. But I want there to be a real human touch. Imagine this. You've done some cold outreach. Someone asked for more information. They received a reply asking them to schedule a meeting. Because I just told you guys, you should always steer towards scheduling a meeting instead of answering the question straight up. He would send a reply back to that email that would go to the upper flow, the ready to schedule flow, and he would receive an email. If the wait node would be set to 15 minutes each time, he would receive 2 emails exactly being 15 minutes after he sent one, which might raise some red flags and we want to avoid that at all costs. That is why I use a custom line of code to give me a random number between 10 and 20 instead of a static number. But that is such a minor detail, you really don't have to worry about it. I just like to think of myself as a bit of a perfectionist, so that's why. So the setup for the other 2 parts of the flow are very similar. So both in this case, the ready to schedule case and the not interested one, we change the status of the lead. Accordingly, in our CRM, for the not interested part of this flow, I've written a standardized response I don't think it is best if someone has clearly shown they're not interested by explicitly saying it in their email or something like it to pester them and keep on hunting them. I think you should be respectful. So I always like to say, hey, thanks for the note, lead name, just for my own feedback. What makes this not interesting? Thanks a lot. Asking for feedback kind of gives you a bit of opportunity to continue on. Maybe there was something very specific about your cold outreach that didn't align with their vision. So if they respond back to this email, you could maybe continue the conversation and try to win him over anyways. And if he just says, we already have this in-house or whatever, you can leave it at that and make sure you don't get into his spam folder. For the rest of this sequence, I already touched upon. So a wait note, a Slack note to check, or the HTTP request node, which is just the Instantly API. Then for the third and final subflow of this entire workflow, the ready to schedule one, there is a pretty interesting part. In my cold outreach, I always send the link to book a meeting directly in my first email, but I also ask them to send me over sometimes. Some people are just too lazy or not technically savvy to click the link, or they don't want to press the link in a random cold email, so they'll send me over sometimes. That would make life a little bit more difficult, but in this case it wouldn't, because I've given the large language model access to my calendar. So if I receive some times in the email, it would go into this large language model, which would check the availability. One thing to note is that it would have to match time zones. As I said earlier on in this video, I'm from Amsterdam and most of my clients are from the US, and even inside of the US there are different time zones. So you have to give it today's date, my time zone, and the user's time zone. We know the user's time zone because we know their location, because it's inside of our CRM, because we know that when we scraped the lead. It's kind of like spying on someone. That's pretty funny. And then the prompt is kind of a step-by-step guide how I want the large language model to act. I know that it probably could be a lot shorter, so you guys don't have to copy everything word for word, but I just found that this one never makes any mistakes, while I've tried different variations which were shaky at times. So of course there are two possibilities when someone sends me over their available times. Either I am available or I'm not available. If I am available, it'll send them an email back that I will schedule a meeting at that time. If I'm not available, the LLM of the large language model will have checked times that are very close to his suggestions, which I am available at, and it will send them back some of the times that I can actually make to make the entire process a lot easier. Because I always send the link to book a meeting directly in my cold outreach, them sending over times rarely happens, but in the case it happens, I have built this into my system, and I would strongly advise you guys to just copy everything I did, because this takes care of 99% of the email replies I receive, and it will do the same for you, I promise. All right, that was a lot, but that was it. You now have the blueprint to build your own AI inbox manager. This system will help you stay on top of your leads. It will respond faster and it will close more deals in the end, all without sacrificing sleep or without sacrificing your own time.
By now, you've seen exactly what an automated cold outreach system looks like, and you've probably started piecing together your own setup. If you've made it this far, you're not just sitting on an idea, you're already building, testing, and seeing how this works in practice. But here's the real story. Automation is just the launchpad. This is where things actually get interesting. When I first got into building these systems, I thought the automation itself would be the game changer, but that's only half the story. What really moves the needle is what you do after the system is live. I'm not trying to make this sound like some gated secret or only available in my mastermind playbook. I built this module so you can actually pull this off yourself, whether you're solo, ready to hand things off, or thinking about turning your workflow into a real productized service. The goal is for you to win on your own terms and come back when you're ready to take things further. So in this final stretch, I'll walk you through how everything ties together. The scraping, the enrichment, the writing, the booking, the follow-up, so your entire outreach machine learns like clockwork. You'll see exactly what's worked for me and my clients.
Now that is out of the way, let's dive into this amazing presentation I made for you guys. So first of all, I'm going to talk about why personalization matters in cold outreach. Well, the problem is very simple. As I already said, generic emails don't get you anywhere. Most cold emails fail because they look like spam, generic, irrelevant, and impersonal. Prospects can immediately tell when an email is mass sent
Just imagine for yourself. I mean, if you're running a business, you get cold emails all the time. Most of them, the ones that I get, most of them are mass generated without a touch of personalization. Sometimes there is a first name. My first name is in there, maybe in a subject line, or maybe as "Hi Clarence" on top of the body of the email. But mostly it's just nothing. This is actually an example that right here is an example that I got in my inbox a few weeks ago. "Hi, we provide marketing solutions for companies like yours. Are you interested in learning more?" I mean, companies like mine, am I interested in learning more? Marketing solutions. This is so fake. I have no clue what to even say about this email. But there is someone somewhere just bulk sending them to every email they can find on the internet. And it's just a waste of time. I mean, I would be amazed if you guys watching this video would actually read this email and be like, that sounds like the perfect fit for my company. One below, because of course, if you bash something, you have to come up with another example, a good one, actually. So I wrote this one. This is one that I used for a business. It's actually very personalized. So this is a template which only worked with some results. To give you some context, I was doing lead enrichment. So I was scraping their company LinkedIn profile, and I was scraping their business website. And then I let ChatGPT write me a summary and answer some questions that I wrote down in the prompt. And based on those questions, the email was sent down like a certain subflow, which had its own template. And this one was actually if there was something on the company LinkedIn profile, which said something about expanding into a new market or opening an office in another country, another state, whatever. So I'll read it for you guys. "Hi, first name." No, the first name is, you always get the first name whenever you scrape a lead. I mean, I made a video about scraping leads using Apollo. You always get a first name, and it's the easiest way of giving a personal touch to a cold outreach email. "I noticed your company recently expanded into the marketless region." I had a lot of companies that I was in my lead list that I created. There were a lot of companies who were expanding into the UK, because at that time I was starting UK companies. So this would then say into the UK. That's a huge opportunity, but I imagine it comes with new challenges around scaling your outreach. Of course, it comes with new challenges. You're going abroad. "I specialize in helping companies like yours generate high quality leads in emerging markets. I'd love to show you." And then below here was something about the achievements that I've had over the past year, that I've helped other businesses with brand names to give myself some authority in this space. And then I always close it off with, "If this sounds interesting to you, let's schedule a call next week," or "Do you have time next week to see if I can get the same results or better for your company?" A quick, simple CTA at the end. So I wrote it down as follow. Personalized emails show you've done your research, that you care about the recipient's business, and that you're offering something relevant. I mean, what I just said already is, let's say you let ChatGPT determine the type of company they're in, the type of business they're in. That would immediately already solve this generic email right here, because then instead of saying companies like yours, it would be, "I would provide market solutions for B2B lead generation agencies like yours. Are you interested in learning more?" I mean, that small distinction, and that could be automated. I'll go over that in a second. That could be automated. That makes such a big difference already. And if you don't believe me on what I'm saying, I actually did some digging online to actually find a credible source. And that stated that emails with personalized subject lines are 26% more likely to be opened, and personalized emails have a 3 to 5% times high response rate compared to generic ones. So I send out well over 500,000 emails a month, and I've tested everything. I mean, honestly, I actually also tested generic emails just to actually find out if there is a difference. And in my personal experience, the difference is much bigger than 3 to 5 times higher response rates. On generic, like non-personalized emails, well, of course, I always use the first name, but non-business, but no personalization about their actual business, I honestly get no responses other than saying, "Please unsubscribe or remove me from your list." And if you do personalization right, it can be a
killer way of getting new leads for your business. Let me tell you. And why it works? Well, why it works, it's simple. I mean, we as people, whenever you read your name, you hear your name, your interest is immediately piqued. I mean, we're hardwired to pay attention to what feels personal, like a name, the company, or their goals. And that is exactly what personalization works. So, if I read a book and it says Clarence somewhere, I mean, a slight smile comes on my face, and I'm more interested in reading whatever comes after. So I already went over it somewhat, how you can use personalization in the body of the email. And you can also use it in the subject line. I would very much advise to use it in the subject line, but I think that's much more straightforward. To give you guys some examples of cold email subject lines that I use is first name, comma, quick question, or quick thoughts for company name. I would advise use the first name. I think that works better. For me, that works better. Do your own tests. But when it comes to the body of the email, there are 3 ways that I would suggest you personalize it and try it out. All of these can be very easily automated by using a automation workflow and using a LLM to do the enrichment. So first of all would be to research recent company activity. LinkedIn is a goldmine for this. Almost every bigger-ish business is active on LinkedIn. Well, at least they post their achievements because that's the place to post it. So you can look at recent company updates. Like I would just suggest looking at the company profile posts. There might be something about new product launches, hiring announcements. Other things that might be relevant are funding rounds. Funding rounds are an amazing opportunity for you to step in because that just means they receive a big bag of money and they're looking to spend it to expand their business. Well, the perfect opportunity for you to dive right in and sell them your services. And then just mention these. I would mention them in the beginning of the email, in the opening line, to show relevance. You have to keep in mind is, like, when you think about your own inbox, the only thing you see is like the subject line of the email in bold. And then I don't remember the number of characters, but like maybe let's say 40 characters after. So it would be first name, comma, and then maybe half a sentence to a sentence if you keep the word count low. If that's personal, if that's something relevant, like a compliment about them or about their business, or actually something that is valuable to read, they're 100 times more likely to click on the email, and they're much more enticed to actually read what you have to say, and that will get you replies. And that's the thing you're after. So secondly, it's also looking at their LinkedIn posts. It's identifying pain points or goals. If there are multiple posts about hiring for marketing people or hiring for salespeople, and you run a SMMA, so a social media marketing agency, or a lead generation agency like I do, this is also something very good to mention, because then instead of just targeting very broadly, you're targeting people with a specific pain point you can solve for them. Also, again, they're 10 times more likely to have their ears open when you offer them the solution that you can offer them, because you already know that they're looking for something like that. And you can just mention that. I would mention it again at the beginning. I would say I would always usually use all the personalization at the top. That's to get them to read the message, and then everything else can be a template. With some slide, I would use some variables. So once again, there's other videos on my channel about this, but how you can use AI to enrich a lead. But I will give you some quick context right here, right now, since we're talking about it anyway. Let's say you scrape their LinkedIn company profile and you scrape their website, and then you gather all the HTML, filter out the HTML, so only plain text remains, and then you pass that through a LLM. I usually use ChatGPT for business analytics, and you just prompt some questions you want to be answered, and it goes through all the data and answering those questions, like the type of company, the main product and services, their ICP, things like that. And you can use those variables within the body of the email, bringing you back like the thing I already talked about twice. So in this case, here would be within brackets, for example, the type of company. Just how it immediately looks like you've done your research. You actually know what their company is about. You actually know the person you're reaching out to. It's not automated, because that's the beauty of this thing. AI and automation have gotten to a level I mean, you still have to give them the right guidelines, but it has gotten to a level where you can let it all be done for you instead of spending hours researching and enriching everything yourself and coming up with the perfect project opening line. You can just do this and send it to 1,000 people a week or a day, thousands of people a week. And then lastly, a very quick one. Let's say there's not much on their company LinkedIn profile posts and also not much on their website. You can just include a compliment or an insight, like search your email with something positive, like I loved your recent webinar or XYZ. This is usually something it could also be on their LinkedIn company profile. But this is something I think most people would personally rather post on their personal LinkedIn profile. Let's say they just had an article published, or they spoke on a podcast, or they hosted a webinar, or they were at a conference or something like that. You can just give a personal compliment. People like to be complimented. Everyone has an ego that they like to be lifted up a bit. So that is a very strong way of just getting your foot in the door, getting them to read your email, getting them to read your offer, and getting you one step closer to landing a new client. Even though I am hyping personalization up to the next level, there is something to be wary of, and that something is over personalization. I, as a business owner, get a lot of cold emails, some of them much worse than others. Few of them good, but a lot of them not so good. And the things that kind of irks me the most are the ones which are over personalized in a weird way. Like saying something about like the university I went to, something not relevant to my business or to the service they're offering at all. Just something like, congratulations on getting your bachelor's degree in 2019, something like that. Believe me, I don't know why, but believe me, I've come across it multiple times already. It's just something, don't use it. Like, don't go too far on fake details. That's what I wrote down here. Like, authenticity is key. Focus on one or two meaningful personal touches. Same thing as I said before. Usually use personalization at top, and for the rest in the email template, only use variables like that fit within sentences. Don't go overboard. Don't let AI write the entire email because it isn't capable of doing that. Doesn't matter how good your prompt is. Just make it fill in small like sentences or maybe like words, whatever. That'll do the trick. Much better than letting AI do everything. The only downside of personalization and lead enrichment, because you need to enrich the lead before you can have any personalization, is that it takes a shitload of time. Excuse me for cursing, it takes a lot of time. Luckily, and that's literally all that my channel is really about, is that I sell and implement automated sales systems. And part of these automations is that you can now use AI to enrich the lead, probably just as good as I would do it myself, maybe even better. That makes it a lot more scalable and a lot easier. Imagine scrolling through someone's website, scrolling through someone's company LinkedIn page or their personal LinkedIn profile, writing some bullet points down. It can easily take you somewhere between 15 and 20 minutes. With AI, it takes you no more than 30 seconds. And the beauty of it, you can do multiple people at the same time. So it is no match for humans. And especially if you know how to use the AI instead and control it instead of letting it do something on its own and let it go rogue. If this is your first time being on my channel, you probably aren't aware, but like all my previous videos are about how to set up automated workflows that do exactly this: enrich the lead, write personalizations based on the data you scrape from their website or whatever, and then use it to implement in email templates. So I won't go over it too much. This one, look at previous videos, and literally all my future videos will be mostly about how you can use it for yourself and how you can replicate those. I use N8N. Most people will be more familiar with Make, but I think N8N has a lot more capabilities and is much more scalable and looks a lot nicer, actually. To give you guys some context of what one of those automations would look like, I wrote down an example workflow. This is very quick, very short, concise overview. This would be a lot more
in depth if you actually build it out. But this is just to give you an idea. So the first step would be to scrape LinkedIn posts using N8N. Well, you would scrape them using an HTTP request to get all the HTML on the LinkedIn company website, and then filter that to only leave the text, and then put that through an LLM with a adequate prompt. But you get the idea. And then analyze the post for key insights like pain points, recent updates about the business, whatever. And then the third step would be to use ChatGPT. I usually use Claude for copywriting. I just think Claude does a much better job at copywriting, but I use ChatGPT for analytics. So just imagine instead of ChatGPT, it's saying Claude. So use Claude to generate a personalized email opener. Personalized email openers based on company LinkedIn posts could be like, congratulations on hiring John Doe, your new COO. Good to see you expand your team, or amazing hire, something like that. Or another example, because this is something a lot of companies post about, is if they've just had a funding round and they received 12 million in funding, you could congratulate them on that, and just you have it as a small email opener. And then lastly is send the automated emails through your email platform. I always talk about Instantly. That's the one I use. You can use whatever, Smartly, you name it. And then this entire workflow would be part of an automation. So all of this would be automated. All of these steps would be done in one go after one press of a button. I hope it sparked your interest if it wasn't already, and makes you go look at some previous videos. The last thing I wrote down is it's very important, and I also already talked about this, but it's very important to maintain human-like quality. Like, if you let the AI run wild and let it write entire emails, 99.9% of them won't be any good. And one reading it will know it right away that this was not written by a human, because it just starts thinking of crazy things. The structure of the email makes no sense. It's very important that the personalization feels natural. So I would strongly advise to build a cold email template. I mean, if you're struggling, let me know in the comments below and I can make a video about that. But build a cold email template and just let the AI only fill in the blanks and maybe write you a short opener based on the data you scraped. I've tested everything. I spent a lot of time tweaking and working on prompts, but I haven't been able to get AI to write an entire email which is good on a consistent basis, which can be used at scale. So just use a template, save yourself a lot of headache, and you'll be fine. So just a small recap of the things I already talked about. Personalization is a non-negotiable. Personalization is the key differentiator when it comes to cold email outreach working or failing. I've heard a lot of people, they come to me after watching my videos, reach out to me on my socials, say, hey, I am using cold email for my business. It doesn't work at all. I've sent 5,000 emails. I've gotten 0 positive responses. And then I ask them to send me a copy or send me an example of the emails they send out. And 9 out of 10 times, let's say 8 out of 10 times, there's no personalization. Sometimes it's the offer or something else in the email, which we can then work out. But personalization is it's a must, especially nowadays. People are sending out cold emails. It's become really easy. People do it in bulk. And the thing that can make you stand out is to personalize it in just that way that makes people want to read the email and actually think that you've done your research into them or into their company. So simple actions you can take to get started is to research your prospects. LinkedIn is your best friend. Well, I already talked about LinkedIn. I think that's probably the best place to get the information from, to use as background to come up with a personalization, or let AI come up with personalizations. And as I said already, based on that, cross-relevant and personalized openers, and start using automation tools to save time. All of this can be automated. There's videos. I already said this a bunch of times. There's plenty of videos on my channel which shows a very simple workflow that you can replicate or copy yourself, maybe tweak a bit, to personalize cold emails and start sending them out to leads. I mean, it has to be said that cold email outreach is the highest ROI sales channel there is. And with automation and AI, there's really no reason not for you to jump on it.
because it can be so effective and it's so massively scalable if you do it right. Sending a bulk email to 1,000 people might get you a few responses, but most, if not all of them, will be to kindly remove them from your subscriber list. Personalization solves this problem, gets you a lot of responses, a lot of bookings, and people actually feel like you've done your research and they're more willing to do business with you. The thing is that researching each and every lead and writing a personalized email to every one of them used to take way too much time. Luckily for you and luckily for me, we live in the age of AI and automation, which makes this a lot easier. Let's dive into the automation here on screen, since that's why you clicked on this video, and I'll go over each node step by step so everything is clear for everyone. Before I go over each node step by step, I want to get two things out of the way. As you can see here, I use a webhook to trigger this workflow. The webhook is deactivated because I'm going to show you guys one specific example. This webhook, to put it simply, is just a trigger from another website or some other software, which sends something to this webhook to get this started, and usually contains some information. In this case, for this workflow, it would contain the information of the record ID, which it then needs to get from the Airtable. I'll get into that in a second. First, let me go over why I'm using two if nodes, for those who have been looking at our screen quite closely. The reason being is that if you scrape leads from Apollo, and even though your filters are very strict, let's say you're only filtering for businesses inside of the US, which I am doing, there might also sometimes be some businesses which aren't based in the US, which are based in India, the UK, France, whatever. That's why I've implemented this extra step. When retrieving all the information from Apollo, I also retrieve the company's HQ location. If that's not in the US, then this simply goes down to false and it updates my Airtable stating the business not in the US, don't pursue this lead. Same goes for this check. This checks if it's a B2B or a B2C business. I'm in the lead generation services business for B2B companies. So sending a email to B2C companies offering my services is of no use. It'll most likely just get me put into a spam folder, which will hurt the reputation of my email account and also hurt my deliverability in the long run. Now that has been covered, let me dive into each node step by step and let me show you how this magic actually works. So first off, I'm pulling a lead from the Airtable. So I'm simply pulling a lead from a list of leads. So usually on the input side, there's some information, because this is on the left side, there's a webhook, which then would have received not only a trigger, but also the record ID information. So you would input this record ID information as a variable here. So this is the JSON code for that, json.query.recordID. But as I already said, because I'm just using one example, I copy and pasted the specific record ID of this person, Matt Benfold. All the information you see over here on the output side is just information that is scraped from Apollo. So I've not done any research. This is just simply an Apollo scraper. If you haven't done it and you want more information on how to get all this information, like their LinkedIn URL, their company website, etc., email address, then a bit further down the line, you might notice a wait node. Some might be thinking, why do we use a wait node? That's because, let's say I bulk trigger workflows from Airtable. So I want a lot of leads to be enriched at the same time. This sometimes caused my HTTP request node to give me a timeout error saying there are too many requests at the same time. So I simply added a wait node, which waits 3 seconds between each and every one of them to give this one some more time and not make it give me an error. The LinkedIn company scraper, all it does is literally get the LinkedIn organization URL from the left side. It goes to the website and retrieves all of the HTML from that page. As you can see, there's a lot of unnecessary stuff. And as always, we only want to retrieve the text. So that's why I use this code node. You see this code node all over the place. In this case, remove HTML. And in this case, remove HTML. It is used to remove the HTML from the retrieve web page it got. And the other ones I will go over in a second. So this is code I wrote with the assistance of ChatGPT. For those who don't know, I have some experience with code and I can get myself somewhere, but I don't know everything. So luckily for me, I can call upon ChatGPT whenever it's needed. As you might remember from the last note, and it's also here on the input side, there is a lot of HTML, which was retrieved from the web page. That's why I use this code. This code simply filters all the HTML and only returns me the plain text. As you can see on the right side, all you can see is plain text, no code anywhere, perfect filter. You can, to save yourself a lot of time, just pause this video. I'll show you the code very slowly. Just put it on a notepad somewhere and paste it in for yourself. Continuing on, maybe give you some oversight. So in this HTTP request node, we retrieved all the HTML from the company LinkedIn profile. The company LinkedIn profile contains a lot of information about the number of employees the company has, an about section, sometimes some recent posts the company posted on there, depending on the size of the company and how involved they are in the modern world. In this ChatGPT node, I simply ask it to summarize and find the most relevant posts from the company LinkedIn profile. I won't read out all of the prompts, so same as you did for the code node, please just pause your video and write this down somewhere, because it's a lot to go over. And it's also very specific on the services you're offering, because I want to know some different information and some different insights to target my specific offer to them. And you, depending on the service you offer, might have something completely different in mind. One thing to note is that I output all of this content as a JSON, and I also tell it here in the prompt how I want it to output each and every time. That's because later down in this workflow, I'm going to use some of these sections and I want them to always be outputted in the same way. Otherwise, you might get some errors here and there. Just take note of that. Then for the second code node, this is once again quite a simple code, even though it might look confusing to the untrained eye. If I were you, I would just pause the video and copy this for yourself. What this does is put all of the JSON, which you can see on the left side, are all individual pieces of information, and it turns it into one piece of text, which is once again a lot easier. Well, it's the only kind of feasible way. The AI, the ChatGPT node, which I'm using further down this workflow, to kind of read through this all. So the same as for the remove HTML code node, I also have 3 of these views input. That is because at several points in the workflow, I want the output of the LLM, in this case the ChatGPT node, to be outputted as a JSON, because there might be some specific parts of that output that I want to use as input in something else. And to use it as input consistently, it needs to be the same code each and every time. And for it to be the same code each and every time, it's best to output it as a JSON. Otherwise, it's a lot of prompting, and those prompts might not always be as detailed or as specific or as effective as you want them to be. So save yourself some time, output the ChatGPT response as a JSON if you need it further down the line, and then simply use a code node to then fuse it back together in one piece of text. So I already went over the if node, so I'll skip over that for now, which brings us on to the get company website, which is once again simply a HTTP request node put to get. This is quite a bit of code. This is simply because this is an if it's available, use this. If not, use the other. So you can copy this, but you can also save yourself some time, because 9 out of 10 times the lead information scraped from Apollo includes the company website. So you could also just put this company website and paste it here as a variable to get the HTML from their company website, which in this case is everything you see on the output side. Once again, you see some text like over here, but you see a lot of unnecessary HTML, which is also hard to read for the large language model. So we are filtering this once again using this code node with the exact same code as we had before. So if you paused it and copied this, it'll look exactly the same as this. And on the right side, we can once again see it has filtered 99% of the HTML and just only the plain text remains. For the second large language model node, I ask it to analyze the data from the company website. Once again, I won't read through the entire prompt because I think it's a waste of time since it's quite specific, but you can copy this for yourself and make some adjustments where needed. Here, I ask it to retrieve product and do product and service analysis. I ask it to look for the key messaging and the value proposition of the service of the business. And I ask it to do content analysis. So if there are any success stories or whatever, it'll let me know. And then on the right side, you would get the output. For the person who's paying attention, this is not being outputted as a JSON. This is already one piece of text because I'm not using any of these outcomes specifically in other nodes. So you might be wondering, oh, if you're not outputting this as a JSON, why is this a fuse input node right after it? That's because I want these two texts, the summarize the relevant plus relevancy of the LinkedIn company profile and the analytics of the company website, to be fused into one piece of text altogether. As you can see, source 1 is company website and source 2, which is why it looks a bit strange, is the fused together JSON from the company LinkedIn business profile. And then the combined text is everything, exactly everything. A bit of a different code, even easier code. Once again, mostly written by ChatGPT, understood by me, pasted in here, tested a few times, and then it works. Then this is quite a strange note to some of you because you might say, I already pulled the company name from Apollo. Yes, you did. But sometimes that company names includes ink or includes some text, which you would never use writing an email to someone. Because let's say you're emailing someone at Tesla and it would have been a startup, but let's use Tesla for an example. And you would say, hey, great growth or amazing seeing your growth with Tesla Inc. Nobody uses Tesla Inc. when talking to someone who works at Tesla. You just talk about Tesla. So you want to erase that Inc. part or erase whatever they've put as their company business name and clean it, so to say. In this case, there was nothing strange about it. The company is called Fairs Inc. It was already called Fairs. So all that's remaining is Fairs. It's a very, well, it's interesting because I use O1 Mini for this, the reasoning model. And it's a very short prompt because it's a very easy task. As you can see, sometimes the name might include LLC, Inc. or Limited if you're talking about UK companies. And you just want to filter that and keep a clean company name so you can address them in your business email, your cold email. Which brings me on to the summarize input node. What this does, or what the input actually is the analyze content from the LinkedIn company profile and from the business website. Here you have the prompts, and here is the more specific prompt. I ask it to do several things: define the company's industry, summarize the main mission or values, describe the main product, summarize that main product, highlight the company's main USP, identify the type of company, and identify their target audience and the ICP, ideal client profile, output it exactly like this. So it's also outputted as a JSON. You can see, and you can also see it on the right. So for first, this is the output. It's a clean technology and energy management, etc., etc. But where it's interesting is you've retrieved quite some information, some recent posts from the LinkedIn business profile, but also maybe some post or some text on the website which highlighted a specific achievement. And this node picks out one of them, the one it finds most notable. Excited to work with Arcadia, so problems for large corporate energy users. So this is most likely a business partnership. I've filtered it to make this a recent achievement. So this is probably within the last 9 months, which we can then later on use in this one, because I'm skipping over the code node for now as I'm on a tangent. But in this one, we use specifically that, the excited to work with Arcadia to solve problems for large corporate energy users to create a personalization. So the opening line of the cold email would be, impressed by your partnership with Arcadia, taking a major energy challenge for our customers. Let's say you are the founder or CEO of First, the company we are targeting, which we pulled from the Airtable, and you would read this personalization. One I just read over, impressed by partnership with Arcadia, taking major energy and challenges for large customers. It's something highly specific. The least you would think is that I would have scrolled either through your website or through your company LinkedIn profile, and I took some time to research your company, which I didn't. This entire workflow is triggered by a press on the button, or to be more specific, ticking a checkbox in Airtable, and it outputs all this information, saving you a lot of time, and also meaning you can do this in bulk. Depending on how many email accounts you have, you can send 100 of these emails a day. After you've generated a personalization, which is usually just the opening line or the second line of a cold email, we simply update the Airtable with all the information we received. We use the ID to match, so this is the exact same record ID we use to pull lead from Airtable. In that note, we upload the clean company name, so it's there for future reference. We upload all the information we got from their LinkedIn company profile, same from their business website. We also upload the summary, but let's say you want more information or a summary isn't clear, which might sometimes be the case. You can just look back at more elaborate information. We upload the personalization. In this case, I also upload the time, which is just simple. We upload what type of company it is, and we upload their product and service. So in just a quick overview in your CRM, you exactly know what this company is about. Let's say they schedule a meeting and you need to do some research. We do the same in the note below. This is a HTTP request note sent to post, method as post actually. This is simply a Instantly API, which Instantly is my cold email software. It's the cold email software that I use and that I recommend because it's very easy to use and also very easy to set up. And I simply send all the information. So I sent email address, first name, but also its personalization that we generated. And once again, type company, product and services. In future videos, I will show you how I set up my Instantly and how you can copy that exactly. But for this case, it's not really necessary. Good thing to note, this can be an API upload to whatever you use. You can also do it manually but on this channel, we try to automate as much as possible. But let's say you use SmartLead or something else to send emails. It can be whatever. That's all I'm trying to say.
Show that cold email is one of the highest ROI methods for client acquisition when it is done right. Cold email is cost effective, scalable, and when executed properly, just as I showed you just now, it can generate consistent results month over month. For some reason, most business owners either ignore cold email completely or write it off as ineffective. After seeing what I just showed you and what it has done for my business, you might be wondering why. Well, it's because they don't have the time to figure it out, they can't make it work, or they had a bad experience in the past, of which I can't blame them. Here's the truth: if your cold email feels generic, rushed, or impersonal, they simply won't work. People nowadays, because email has been around for the longest time and people are getting blasted left and right, they can instantly spot an email that was blasted out to hundreds of others without any effort. When you take the time to craft emails the right way, cold emailing becomes one of the most powerful tools in your outreach arsenal, if not the most powerful tool. Now, the common mistake people make when starting cold outreach is they try to do everything manually. I've heard this complaint thousands of times. They themselves dive into personal LinkedIn profiles, they look onto company websites, and they do endless Google searches, hoping to find the right details for each and every prospect themselves. This is a very tedious process, as you might imagine. It's repetitive and it eats up hours of your valuable time. And after all that work, the results rarely justify the efforts. Details get missed, leads pile up, and the process slows to a crawl, because once you're doing everything, all the research manually, you can't really be occupied with follow-ups. This method simply doesn't scale. That's why I promote automation on my channel, because this is where automation changes everything. Tools like ChatGPT or Claude can do the heavy lifting. They process massive data sets, extract the details you need, and organize everything in minutes. Automation is a game changer for 3 reasons, and that's why I love talking about it so much. First of all, being speed. Automation means you can process hundreds, even thousands of leads in the time it takes you to drink coffee. Large language models are also insanely accurate. They use clean, consistent data without any errors or oversights. They won't make human errors like you and I. And then thirdly, they're insanely scalable. Like, your time is limited, but automation works endlessly. In cold outreach, speed and precision are everything. Simply put, manual work holds you back. Automation keeps you moving forward. Instead of wasting hours on research, it frees you up to craft email templates that convert and focus on closing deals. This isn't just about saving time, it's about making the entire process smarter, faster, and more effective. For my subscribers, they might remember 2 videos ago, I showed how to pull key variables from a personal LinkedIn profile, a company LinkedIn profile, or a company's website. If you missed that video, check it out after this one. I'll give you a quick breakdown of the process. Let me quickly go over the flows again, so you have an idea of how it works if you haven't seen it before. The way you have to look at this is these are 3 individual flows essentially, and each of these flows scrapes a different source. In the first one, we scrape someone's personal LinkedIn profile. The second one, we scrape a company LinkedIn profile. And then lastly, we scrape the company website, which in this case is just only their homepage. Each of these sources gets us different information. So on the personal LinkedIn profile, we might get to learn something about the interests of the lead, like the school they went to, an oversight of their career, how long they've been at the company they've been at now, or when it was founded, if let's say you're targeting a founder. Also, a lot of C-suite people like to talk about their philanthropic efforts, if they're part of any like non-profits, things like that. That's always a good thing to use as an opener in your email. The same goes for you and I. We like to be complimented about the things that we're doing correctly. Same goes for mutual connections. Let's say you and the lead have some mutual connections. That's a very big bonus because you can mention them or let the AI mention them, which brings us on to the company LinkedIn profile. Completely different set of information, so some different variables you can get from that. We can look at the company size, if there are any posts about recent growth, recent achievements, or they've received funding, for example. Funding is especially a big one. For me, I target a lot of SaaS companies. There is a lot of money in the SaaS world. Companies are getting funded left and right, and it is the ideal situation for me to step in because I know they just received a big bag of money that they're looking to spend, and they're also looking to expand their sales, which is exactly what I can help them with. But this is of course different for whatever service you offer. Just thought it was an interesting side note for those who are looking to start the exact same kind of business that I currently have. And then lastly, as I already briefly talked about, we can scrape the company website. Well, on the company website, 9 out of 10 times, all of this is present, like the pricing, testimonials, and success stories. Their USP, for those who aren't familiar with that abbreviation, USP means unique selling point. Companies always like to state how they're different from the rest, even though they're selling the exact same product. But talking about the USP in a cold email can be very interesting because it shows you have an understanding of what they actually sell and how they actually set themselves apart from their competition. And then lastly, based on information on the homepage of a company, you can usually determine their ICP. A little trick that I like to use is I like to use the ICP, which was determined by the AI somewhere in the beginning of the email, not only showing that I understand their business, but also saying that I can bring them in contact with their ICP, which to them sounds like a no-brainer because that's exactly who they want to be in contact with. Getting information from any of these sources, let alone all of these sources, lets you craft a message that directly ties your offer to their priorities and challenges, or just says something nice about them personally, which can also be a big help. Automation can pull all of these variables for you, saving hours of manual work because scraping all of these sources yourself well, it would at least take you half an hour. Once you have this data, crafting personalized high impact outreach become much easier and much more effective. Because on this channel, I'm all about providing value, I'm going to show you guys the exact email template that I used to get almost 52,000 in potential revenue just last month. No fluff, no gimmicks. As you can see, it has worked, and I'm going to show you how I set it up. I'm going to break it down for you and tell you exactly why it converts. So you can copy it straight up, or you can use it as a foundation to create your own. Either way, you'll walk away with something you can implement immediately, you can implement into your strategy today. Writing cold emails is not about throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks. It's about a strategy, precision, and making every email count. So let's get into it. What you see on screen right now is actually the opening email of my sequence. Everything that's within brackets is a variable that I let the AI fill in. So that was part of an automation. I'll dive into the exact high-ticket automation that I used for this one in future videos. So if you're interested, please subscribe. So we're starting off with the simplest form of personalization, which is just a first name. I'll quickly read you through the email and then I'll talk about the structure. So I found you on LinkedIn and noticed a specific detail about them or their company. So I thought I'd reach out. I'm a freelancer who builds systems for agencies to generate 20 sales appointments a month without spending a cent on ads. In December, I helped ConvertSol book 124 appointments in under 30 days. I'm confident we can achieve similar results for company name. Is risk-free. We guarantee at least 20 appointments in the first 2 months or you don't pay. Would a quick 10-minute call this week work for you? Well, you might notice that even though I talk about personalization in email nonstop, it's also the art to not overdo it. So the only big chunk of personalization that was present in this email is this part about specific details about them or their company. So you have to imagine, and I'll show you quite quickly over here, is I used a combination of these flows. I put them all together kind of like this, just to give you. And then at the end, there was a large language model which took the information or the answers to the questions from all of the data sources, so the personal LinkedIn profile, the company LinkedIn profile, and the company website, and kind of classified what piece of information was the most interesting to write a short personalization about. And then I uploaded that onto this template, which came out with some amazing results. As I said previously, a lot of the SaaS companies that I was targeting did receive some funding. So often funding was mentioned, or recent growth, like a new hire, or maybe a new office they opened, or a new product they launched, you name it. But even though that is like different for everyone, the rest of the email template is pretty straightforward. And as I said, I send out thousands of emails a month. And even though my email templates might change, my call to actions might change, whatever, the structure is always the same. So you just open the email, use their first name. Then we're on to personalization, which is very high up there. If someone receives an email, well, if you receive an email in your inbox, what you see is a subject line. Subject lines are always also very straightforward. And then you see like, I believe 40 characters, which is the first line of the email or part of the first line of the email, depending on how long it is. And if that says something about a person or about an achievement they've had or something that happened to them recently, they're much more likely to open the email because that's actually something that they can read and that it might be thought-provoking. And that's exactly what you want. You want to provoke them to read the rest of the email, read your offer, and eventually book a call with you. Then we're on to this part, which I've named Sell the Dream. Businesses are not interested in what you do or how you do it. They're just interested in what you can bring them, what you can do for them, how their life is going to be easier. So sell them the dream. In this case, it was very simple. I said, I'm a freelancer who builds systems that generate 20 sales appointments a month. What business owner doesn't want 20 sales appointments a month with qualified leads? Everyone who wants to scale and who isn't thinking about retirement wants that offer. Then add some social proof, because you have to imagine this is a cold email. You might be able to imagine maybe you've received some cold emails with offers. This is someone you don't know. You've never heard of them, probably, unless you have a big company already. Otherwise, you've never heard of them. You don't know who they are. You don't know really what they do. So name dropping helps a lot. If you worked with big companies, use that for sure. If you've worked with big names in the industry, let's say you're in the influencer space, use those like Gary Vee, Tony Robbins, you name it. I haven't been around that long. I've worked with a couple of 7 and 8 figure companies. One of them was Convert Soul. And I actually helped them to book 124 appointments in under 30 days. It was for demos, which made my job a lot easier, but this is factual. And then a guarantee. The guarantee was something I wasn't too sure about when I started off, but I read the book $100 Million Offers by Alex Hormozi, and he was like, you always have to offer someone a risk-free guarantee in some way. If you haven't done it in the past, or you're starting out just like I was a few months ago, this might be a little bit daunting, but rest assured, just think of something you think you'll be able to deliver. And if it's not the case, well, at least you've had the experience and you know you have to change your guarantee for the next one. Adding a guarantee to my emails has been a game changer for my positive reply rates. It's also something people talk about during meetings, so it's something they really pick up from the email. And it just gives them that little push, that little nudge, that I'm confident that I can bring them results and they won't be wasting either their time or their money with me. And then lastly, the call to action. In this case, I asked for a quick 10-minute call this week. I don't always advise to immediately ask for a call, really depending on your service. I mean, if your offer is good and you're confident in what you do and you have but let's say you have a bit of a more complicated service or product, it might be interesting for you to, instead of ask for a call, ask if you could send over a case study or if you could send over some more information, concluding that the call to action can be different depending on your niche, depending on who you're targeting. You could try asking for a call immediately. If you have little success, try switching it up. Try providing more value first, because people like to have some value first before they're willing to provide value, in this case, their time to book a meeting. Just whenever you're writing an email, if you're not copying mine, just remember this structure. This structure works like a charm, bringing me on to the follow-up email. So in essence, I almost always send 3 emails if I'm asking for a call in the first one. Otherwise, I send 4 emails, with the second one being a follow-up with the video sales letter, for example, or a case study. The second email is really just there to kind of restate what I sent in the first email. Sometimes a lot of founders get tons of emails each and every day, so it might get snowed under inside of their inbox. So we just want to kind of up it again, be on top of it. So maybe they'll give it a read. It is a very similar structure to the first one, so there's not really much to talk about. I'll quickly read it for you guys. So, hey, first name, just wanted to follow up to see if you had a chance to check out my last message. I'd love to connect. Here's the short version. Here I don't use the exact same social proof that I used in my first email. I use a different one, and I also make a guarantee. So the structure remains the same. Then I ask for a 10-minute call this week, same as I did before. And I also give them a little nudge that if this isn't your area, could you point me to the right person? Meaning, let's say you target a founder of a company, but he's not in charge. This is a interesting nudge, because there's also been a lot of people who responded really just only based on this trigger, saying, hey, I am the right person, but I just don't have time right now. Meaning they're engaged. You can send them follow-up emails, because once someone's engaged, like, everything is fair. And then lastly, there is a third email. This is kind of my goodbye email, as you can see. I'll read it. So lastly, there's the third email, which is my goodbye email. You don't want to pester people too long. Well, in my experience, if they've ever responded to one of your emails, be sure to hit them every day, every other day, until you have booked a meeting. But if they haven't responded, maybe give it up and follow up with them in a few months' time with like either a new offer or something different, something you've tweaked. This one gets a lot of replies, actually. Thought I'd hit you one last time. I still think I can send some leads your way, but I'll assume the timing isn't right. No hard feelings. If you see room to grow, just let me know and we can help on a quick call to break it down. Everyone is looking to grow their business, unless you're looking for retirement. So I've had so many emails, so many responses to this email of people saying, hey, yeah, I am looking to grow. I am looking to scale my business, but this and this, or I don't have time right now. Can you follow up with me in a week? Which is exactly why you do this. You give them kind of like the final nudge without being too salesy, saying, hey, if scaling or growing your company is not your priority, which of course it is their priority, you just get them exactly where you want, meaning they'll respond to you. So for those paying close attention, you might have noticed that really only the first email has some more advanced personalization, and the rest of them just include their first name and their company name. You could use some other personalization in the follow-up emails. To give you guys an example, something that I've used in the past was in like the second or third follow-up email saying, hey, I just closed a deal with, within brackets, type of company. And then I would have AI determine what type of company they are. So they think, oh, well, they closed a deal with someone familiar to what I offer. They might be good at what they do. If you've booked a success or anything, let's check it out, book a call. That's a very powerful way of using personalization, but it has to be noted that personalization shouldn't be overdone. As I always state, writing the templates yourself is almost a must because there are variables, bringing you back to the first one. Like there are variables like either your offer, which is sell the dream, or your guarantee, which you have to like fine tune as you go. Whether you're a B2B business owner, whether you're starting out like I did yourself with an agency, tweaking your offer it's an ongoing process. Same goes for the guarantee. The market which you're in is always evolving, I assume. So there might always be like new offers working now, which weren't working months ago, or the other way around. The same goes for the guarantee. I mean, in the lead generation business, which I am in, there are also a lot of people who sell their services based on results. So they only charge per booked meeting instead of on a retainer. I don't really think that's a feasible way to go about it because that's a race to the bottom, but to each their own. So while your competitors waste time sending bland generic emails, you are sending messages that land in the right inboxes because you've got your templates ready, and using flows just like these, you have all the information also ready to fill in those templates and actually get results. Using automations just like this and like the other ones I always highlight on my channel, you're not just keeping up, you're staying ahead of the competition because a person simply can't compete with what you're doing. An SDR simply can't compete with what you're doing.
This saves you a lot of time while still giving you control over the creative process so you can continuously improve your outreach. I mean, if you're excited, start setting up this system today. It's a practical and scalable way to take your cold outreach to the next level without sacrificing any quality or performance. What I've shown you just now is one part of a much larger system for cold outbound outreach. If you already have a B2B business and are exploring cold email as a new way to acquire clients, or if you're looking to improve your existing outreach, I can help. There's a link in the description below to book a discovery call. During the call, I'll show you exactly how I can build and manage a fully automated cold email outreach system tailored to your business specifically. From crafting the perfect offer to writing personalized email copy and handling all the technical setup, I'll take care of everything. That way you can focus on closing deals and scaling your business. You've made it through the full system, from the big picture logic down to the practical details. At this point, you know exactly how to build, automate, and run a cold outreach machine that actually gets results. But having the playbook is just the start. The people who win are the ones who keep testing, keep refining, and actually put the system into practice. That is where the real breakthroughs happen. If you want to shortcut years of trial and error, copy my 100K a month automations and get hands-on support as you build. My school community is where you'll get everything you need. It's not just a course, it's a challenge, a network, and live access to the latest working playbooks. You'll go from zero to a fully automated client engine in just 21 days, backed by a group of operators who will push you to get your first client fast. The link is in the description. Join us and let's get to work.